Tonight, we're going to spend the next few hours living the quiet, ordinary life of someone history rarely remembers. There are no kings, no famous battles, no great discoveries, just another day in the Middle Ages. Tonight, you walk through a quiet day with a Viking longship navigator. Not the heroic version, the real one, the cold one, the salt-stiff one, the one made of damp wool, sore eyes, creaking planks, and small, careful judgments in the dark. If quiet nights like this help you rest, you are welcome to stay with the channel. Now let the room grow a little softer, let your breathing slow, and settle in beside the low shape of a northern ship where black water lifts and lowers the hull beneath a pale night sky. You wake without a bell. There is no bell to wake you here. Only cold, only damp, only the feeling that the ship has been moving beneath you all night, because it has. The planks under your shoulder are hard, and the wool wrapped around you has taken in the smell of salt, tar, and old spray. Rest at sea is never quite rest. It is a pause with one ear still open. When you sit up, the world is dim blue and grey. Not morning yet, not fully night either. A thin light sits low behind cloud, and the sea around the hull looks like hammered lead. Men nearby stir under cloaks and sailcloth. Someone coughs. Someone reaches for a bucket to bail out the water that always gathers in the bilge. Someone else checks a line by touch, not sight. Your work does not begin with a grand command. It begins with looking. A navigator on a Norse vessel has no brass instrument tucked into a chest, no glass lens, no neat painted map spread on a table. What you have is memory, habit, and the sky when the sky agrees to be seen. You have the feel of wind on your face. You have the long slope of the swell under the hull. You have the course held yesterday and the slow, private count of time carried in your body. The ship itself helps teach you where you are. It flexes as the sea passes under it. The overlapping planks of the clinker-built hull give a little with each lift and drop. They creak softly, never fully still. The sound is familiar now. A broad knock from one side means a change in wave strike. A sudden flutter above means the square wool sail wants trimming. A hard pull on the rigging means the wind has freshened while you are half asleep. You move carefully toward the stern, where the steering oar sits mounted on the starboard side. It is not a central rudder like later ships will have. It is a great side oar fixed near the stern, answering the hand and shoulder of the steersman. You are not always the one holding it, but your place is near enough to speak quietly with the man who does. Between the two of you, course becomes a conversation. Not many words, a tilt of the chin, a hand lifted toward a break in cloud. A note that the ship has wandered a little off the swell she held before midnight. The sail hangs heavy with wet. Wool is useful. Wool is strong. Wool is also work. It drinks water. It stretches. It must be watched. On ships like this, the sail may be among the most valuable things aboard, worth long labour before the voyage ever begins. Women and men on land put months of work into wool and weaving before you ever trust it to wind. Out here, that labour turns into a constant duty of checking lines, easing strain, and making sure the cloth does not punish carelessness. Breakfast, if the name can be given to it, is plain. Dried food, a scrap of bread if there is any left fit to chew. Perhaps fish, perhaps something stored in a small chest or wrapped against wet. Exact shipboard meals are hard to know in detail. The broad shape is clearer than the menu. Food that keeps, food that travels, food that asks little from flame and pot. Fresh water matters more than taste. You eat without ceremony and keep looking outward. This is the first task of the day. Not finding adventure, not chasing a horizon, only noticing. Cloud thickness, wind edge, bird flight, If any bird is foolish or fortunate enough to be this far from shore, the colour of water, the steadiness of the swell. On open northern routes, sailors like you do not depend on one perfect trick. They depend on many small signs agreeing just enough. If the night has been clear, you have already used the stars. The North Star is useful, though not perfect. In your age, it does not sit exactly at the pole, so it is a guide, not a nail fixed into heaven. Still, at these latitudes, it stands high enough above the horizon to help. You learn it as part of a pattern, not as a lonely miracle. A point to return to when cloud opens. And when cloud does not open, you return to other things. The remembered route between coasts, the likely distance run since dusk, the direction of the wind that pressed the sail through the dark hours. This kind of reckoning is almost certainly part of your craft, though no neat Viking sailing manual survives to explain it step by step. The knowledge lives in crews, in repeated crossings, in the body, learning what written pages do not keep. So you stand in the cold before sunrise, not master of the sea, only its patient reader. Around you the hull breathes and the sail stirs and the black water goes on lifting. Morning is still a little way off, but the day has already begun. By morning, the light is better, though not kinder. It spreads thinly through cloud and shows every wet surface on the ship. The deck glistens. Rope darkens with spray. The timber near the gunwale shines where hands have polished it over many voyages. Nothing here is dry for long. Now your work becomes less about surviving the dark and more about holding a line through the day. That line is partly in the sea and partly in memory. There are known sailing corridors in your world. Men do not simply point west and hope. Voyages to Iceland and Greenland happen often enough that route knowledge has shape. Distances are remembered in travel time. Lands are remembered in relation to each other. Directions are learned from older sailors long before a younger one is trusted to judge them alone. Still, knowledge at sea never becomes comfortable. The sky changes too much for comfort. This morning, the clouds break in strips, and when they do, you look at the sun the way a farmer looks at soil. Not for beauty, though there is beauty. For use. The height of the sun matters. The arc of its climb matters. In clear enough conditions, daytime light helps steady your sense of direction. Some scholars think navigators may also have used simple shadow devices to compare the noon sun on known routes. A wooden disc found in Greenland has been read this way by some, but its purpose is debated, and no one can say with certainty that a device like that rides in your hand today. So your truest instrument remains the practiced body. You narrow your eyes against glare off the water. The ship runs under sail when wind allows, and the sail is the great labouring heart of the vessel. Men shift it, check it, tighten and ease. A square wool sail can move you fast, but it asks to be watched every hour. If it takes strain badly, the whole ship complains. If the wind changes angle, the ship answers before anyone speaks. You feel it in your knees first, then in the pull of rope, then in the change of sound overhead. The sea is not flat even when it is calm. Long, slow swells come on from far away, carrying news of weather you cannot yet see. Part of your work is to remember how the vessel sits on those swells when the course is true. Not every ripple matters. Not every slap of water means drift. But taken together, over hours the body forms a record. This is why experience matters so much more than cleverness. The sea gives too many signs for a clever fool, and just enough for a patient one. From time to time you scan for birds. In mid-ocean there may be none. Then for hours the sky belongs only to cloud and distant light. But nearer land, birds can become useful company. Later traditions even mention releasing birds to seek shore. Whether that happens on this exact voyage is another matter. The broad principle is plain enough. Birds know coasts better than men do. When they stream in a certain direction with purpose, you notice. You notice smell too. Tar, wet wool, salt thick in the air. Sometimes seaweed on the wind if land or shoal water is not impossibly far. Watercolor can shift. Floating weed can appear. None of these signs are magic. Each one can mislead. Together, they build a quiet argument. The men around you work as crews always do, through repetition more than speech. One bails, one checks stores, one rubs a sore shoulder and laughs once, briefly, before growing quiet again. Another sleeps in the lee of bundled gear, taking rest when he can. Life aboard is shared labor and shared discomfort. There may be a leader, a steersman, men of more or less standing, but the ship reduces everyone to practical needs. Warmth, water, timing, hands where they are needed. There is no clock to divide the morning cleanly. Time passes by hunger, by the climb of light, by the turn of tasks. A voyage like this may last many days with no harbour, and each day folds into the next. You keep order by doing the same small checks again. Look at the sky, feel the wind, watch the sail, speak to the steersman, judge the swell. Remember yesterday, and always there is the route carried in the mind. Scandinavians cross these waters often enough in your age that this skill is no rare wonder. It underlies travel, trade, settlement, news, and family separation. Iceland depends on ships. Greenland depends on ships even more. What you do is ordinary in the hardest possible way. Necessary, tiring, and easy to overlook once land is reached. So the morning goes on in measured attention. No sudden revelation. No shining instrument pulled from a chest. Only cloud opening and closing. Only wool drawing against rope. Only the long, obedient creak of a wooden ship that keeps moving west or north or home because enough small judgments are made well enough. By noon the light will sharpen. For now the sea keeps its slow rhythm, and you keep yours with it. By the time the light begins to lean toward noon, the work changes without becoming any less quiet. Morning watching gives way to small tasks that keep the ship honest. The sail is still your great helper, but it is also your great concern. Wool drinks damp, rope swells. A line that felt right an hour ago can begin to pull awkwardly now. So you move where you are needed, not with hurry, but with the practiced slowness of someone who knows that most trouble begins as a small strain. The square sail hangs above with its own heavy life. When the wind fills it well, the ship settles into a rhythm that almost seems easy. The hull rises, the hull falls. The planks answer with their old creaking speech. But easy is not the same as idle. You keep looking up. You keep listening. A change in the sail's edge. A tremor in a rope. A flap that lasts a little too long before the cloth fills again. These are not grand signs. They are ordinary ones. Still, an Atlantic crossing is made out of ordinary signs taken seriously. Someone checks the lashings. Someone shifts a coil of rope out of standing water. Someone bails from the low place where water always gathers. No ship this size stays dry for long. A little sea comes over, a little leaks in, a little remains from earlier spray and wet boots and damp gear. So the bailer goes down and lifts again. Down and up, down and up. It is one of the least glorious sounds on the voyage and one of the most necessary. You taste salt even when no spray reaches your mouth. It lives on the wool of your cloak, in your beard if you have one, in the grain of the deck beneath your hand. Your hands learn the ship by touch, almost more than sight. This peg is worn smooth. That rail is rougher where many palms have passed over it. The steering oar on the starboard side answers through wood and strain, never perfectly still, always speaking a little. It does not need to thrash to tell you something. A gentle pressure can be enough. Too much drag, a slight yaw, the need for a patient correction. This is where knowledge stops looking like knowledge to anyone watching from shore. There is no bright instrument lifted high. There is no single command that reveals mastery. Instead, there is memory, the remembered feel of a route, the sense that the swell is still meeting the hull from the proper quarter, the sense that the wind has edged a little and must be respected before it edges more. Dead reckoning, if we call it that, is not arithmetic written on a board. It is counted in the body, in how long the ship has run like this, in how much daylight has passed, in the rough agreement between the sky you expected and the motion beneath your feet. At times a bird appears and folds away again into distance. One bird means little. A few birds returning with purpose might mean more. Seaweed in the water, a different smell in the wind. These can matter later, nearer land, though not every hint deserves trust. The sea is full of false comfort. Better to note and wait. Better to add one quiet clue to another until they begin, together, to sound like truth. Food comes almost as another task. There is no lovely noon meal spread before you. You eat what keeps. Dried food. Bread if it has lasted. Something simple passed from hand to hand. Fresh water is too useful to waste on pleasure. Even lunch, if we can call it that, happens around work rather than instead of it. One person chews while watching the sail. Another swallows and reaches for the bailer again. Hunger is fitted into the routine like one more knot in the rope. And still, the ship goes on. This is perhaps the strangest part of sea labor. You work steadily, yet the horizon barely changes. No gate appears. No road marker reassures you. The world remains water, sky, cloth, wood, and the few souls sharing the same narrow deck. Yet voyages to Iceland and Greenland are made this way again and again in the Viking Age, not by magic, but by enough repeated skill carried across enough repeated days. So noon approaches not as a turning point, but as another measure. The light is higher now. The sea has brightened, and you remain where you have been for hours already, among rope, sail, and swell, keeping the passage ordinary enough to succeed. When the sun stands near its height, the day does not pause so much as loosen for a moment. The work becomes smaller in the hands, though never absent. This is the nearest thing the voyage has to midday rest. Not comfort, only a softer grip on labor. You settle where there is space, which is never much. A sea chest, a bundled cloak, a plank that is merely less wet than the next one. The ship still moves beneath you with that patient lifting and setting down, which, after hours, begins to feel like the world's only motion. Your legs adjust without asking permission. Even seated, your body continues its quiet balancing. The meal is plain. On land, plain food may still come with a bench, a wall against the wind, perhaps a fire if fortune is kind. Here it comes with salt in the air and rope near your knees. Exact shipboard meals are not neatly recorded for every voyage, so some of this must be reconstructed from broader Norse food habits and from the simple fact of what can travel. Dried fish keeps. Bread keeps for a while. Butter, cheese, or preserved meat may appear if supplies allow and the weather has not spoiled too much. Whatever reaches your hand has one duty above all. It must last. You chew slowly because there is no reason to rush. The sea gives no reward for hurrying through your food. Around you, the others do much the same. A brief word, a glance at the sail. Someone rubs a stiff shoulder, someone pulls a wet sleeve straighter against the skin. These are not men in a painted saga scene, forever shouting into heroic weather. Most of the time they are workers, tired, watchful, and a little damp. This quiet middle of the day is also when the mind tries to wander. Land thoughts return because the hands are less occupied. You think of farms and halls and turf walls holding still against the wind. You think of Iceland, if that is the road ahead, where so much of life depends on the success of crossings like this one. Timber, iron, cloth, news, kin, promises, law, quarrels, marriages, all of it moves by ship. Greenland depends even more on such passages with longer distances and harsher uncertainty. The navigator's work may look empty in the moment, just one more pair of eyes on open water, but whole settlements lean quietly on that emptiness being read well. If the sky is clear enough, noon also offers a different kind of attention. The sun is not only warmth, and often there is not much warmth to speak of. It is position, height, a clue that joins the others. Some scholars believe mariners may have used simple aids to compare the sun's height on known routes, perhaps with a shadow board or something like the disputed wooden disc found in Greenland. But that part remains uncertain. No complete Viking sailing manual survives to tell you exactly what was held in the hand and how often. So what is safest to say is this: noon matters. The sun matters. A practiced sailor notices it, whether with memory alone or with some humble aid now half lost to us. You lift your eyes and judge the light with the same care you give the sail. Polaris is no help now, hidden by day, and in any case not a perfect fixed point in this period, only a useful one at night. Day asks for different habits: the line of the swell, the pull of the wind, the run you believe the ship has made since morning, the long-trained estimate that can never be exact, only good enough. Good enough is what keeps a voyage alive. Then the small pause ends the way most things do at sea. Not with a signal, not with a speech. A rope needs taking in. A patch of cloud thickens in the west. The sail gives one hollow shudder and fills again. Someone stands, then someone else. Your meal is over because the ship has decided it is over. You wipe your hand on wool or wood and return to the patient business of keeping course. There is comfort in the sameness. After a fashion, the same deck underfoot, the same smell of wet timber and salt, the same horizon refusing to come nearer. It would be easy from far away to imagine navigation as flashes of insight under brilliant stars. Sometimes it is, more often it is this: eating dry food in a damp place, looking up at the sun, feeling the ship answer the wind, and then rising again to continue a task so ordinary that, if you do it well, almost no one remarks on it at all. Afternoon does not bring drama. It brings small corrections, the sort that fill a life at sea more completely than any song about it ever could. The wind shifts only a little at first, not enough to startle anyone, just enough that the square wool sail changes its voice. The cloth had been pulling with one steady note. Now there is a softer flutter at one edge, then a heavier tug, then a pause. You feel it before you fully name it. The pressure on your cheek is different. The ship is still moving well, but not quite in the same willing way. So you do what most of this work asks of you. You notice, you compare, you answer early while the problem is still small. A few hands move to the rigging. Rope dark with spray runs through wet fingers. The sail is trimmed a little, not much, nothing grand. On a Viking ship, and especially on a sea-going vessel bound across northern water, so much depends on this kind of quiet adjustment. Wool sails are costly things, heavy things. They hold power well, but they also drink water, stretch and strain. If lines are left poorly set, the ship wastes effort. If cloth is left to beat too hard in uncertain wind, wear begins where no one wants it. You watch the yard and the shape of the sail. You listen to the hull answer. The vessel is clinker-built, each plank overlapping the next, and it does not meet the sea like a rigid box. It gives a little. It talks in creaks and knocks. It lets the waves pass under it with a flexing patience. That patience is useful, but it also means every change in wind and water writes itself into the wood. A practiced crew can hear when the ship is content. You listen for that contentment now. There is no instrument face to consult, no needle, no clock. The afternoon is measured by light slanting a little lower, by hunger beginning again in the body, by the count of ordinary tasks since the last meal. This is where dead reckoning lives, if we can call it that for this world, not as a chalkboard full of figures, but as memory held in the muscles. The ship has run under this wind for so long. The sail has pulled in this way for these many hours. The swell has struck from this quarter since morning. You keep the line of it in mind. Then cloud begins to gather where you would rather keep open sky. Not a storm. Only a broad greyness thickening in pieces, enough to blur the sun now and then. Its light remains, but its edge grows harder to judge. This is the sort of trouble that belongs to navigators more than to rowers or traders. Not disaster, only uncertainty added grain by grain. When the sun is clear, you can compare more easily. When it passes behind cloud, you are left with what the ship already knows. Wind on skin, the angle of the swell, the way the bow lifts, the remembered course. Some later stories speak of stones that might help find the hidden sun, and there are scholars in our own time who test crystals and light to see whether such a thing could work. Perhaps something like that was known by some sailors. Perhaps not. For a quiet day like this, honesty is better than wonder. No direct manual survives to tell you exactly what sits in a navigator's hand. So for now, your truest tools are the old ones: eye, ear, face, memory. A line needs checking where it has rubbed too long. A loose coil must be moved away from a careless foot. Someone bails a little water from the bilge, because ships of this kind are always admitting some part of the sea, whether invited or not. A wet wooden bailer dips and lifts. Salt water slaps softly into the wind. None of it is exciting. All of it matters. This is the ordinary burden of keeping course, not proving bravery, not discovering a new world each hour, simply refusing to drift farther than the day allows. And when the cloud closes for a while and the sun becomes only a pale brightness somewhere above the wool sail, you stand in the same place and let the ship speak through your feet. The problem is small. The answer is small. The afternoon goes on because enough small answers are given. By later afternoon, the air has that clear northern chill which reminds you that even in the kinder sailing season, warmth is never fully trusted. The voyage exists because people have learned over generations to choose their season carefully. Crossings are not made at random. Longer daylight helps, more workable weather helps. A route is still difficult, but difficulty has its gentler months and its harsher ones, and sensible sailors know the difference. So you travel in the season that gives more light to work with. Even then, the North Atlantic does not become friendly. It only becomes possible. The cold settles in quietly. Your cloak has long since stopped feeling dry in any perfect sense. Salt has stiffened parts of the wool. The hem carries damp. The deck beneath you holds yesterday's wetness as stubbornly as today's. When you shift your footing, the planks shine dully. Tar, salt, wet wood, old rope, wool, and a little human sourness from bodies too long crowded together make up the smell of the ship. There is no fresh breeze pure enough to wash it all away. It only thins and returns, Season matters to a navigator because the sky itself behaves differently from one part of the year to another. In these northern latitudes, summer and its edges stretch the usable day. Light lingers. Twilight takes its time. A man who must judge direction by sun, horizon, swell, and then by stars when they appear is grateful for every extra hour in which the world remains readable. Winter, by contrast, is not merely colder in some simple way. It narrows what can be known. The sea turns darker sooner. Storms grow more common and more stubborn. Ice may trouble certain waters. Cloud can sit low for days. The ship still exists. The crew still exists. But the margin for ordinary error becomes smaller. That is why this present chill, though uncomfortable, also carries a sort of mercy. There is still enough day left to watch the water closely, enough evening ahead for a careful change into night, enough hope that stars may show themselves when darkness finally settles. In a life without mechanical clocks, without charts spread on a cabin table, without a sheltered room from which to direct the vessel, these seasonal gifts are practical things. You know them in the body more than in words. The long evening means less haste. It means another stretch of patient steering before darkness asks more of the memory. It means the sun, though now lower, can still tell you something if a gap opens in the cloud. You are not master of the season. You are simply using what it gives. Around you, the crew also feels the year in small ways. Hands are slower to leave whatever bit of warmth they find in sleeves or under folded arms. Shoulders stay rounded against the wind. A man sits near bundled gear for a moment longer than he needs, before standing again to help with rope. No one announces that the season is turning. No one needs to. The body reports it faithfully, and yet, this is still the season of movement. Ships go because they can. Iceland, Greenland, the islands between, the trading places and farmsteads and harbours of the Norse world, all depend on that fact. Seaborne travel is not a rare feat performed once for glory. It is a foundation under trade, settlement, news, and obligation. A navigator's skill belongs to that plain need. If the route is held well enough, wool, timber, iron, people, messages, and memory all continue to move. So the colder air is not only discomfort, it is also a calendar brushing past your face. You look westward, or northward, or toward whatever bearing this voyage requires, and the horizon remains spare and almost empty. No coast appears simply because you want one. No bird circles just yet with useful news. There is only the season, the ship, and the long habit of reading both. Soon the light will begin its slow thinning into evening. For now, though, the day is still broad enough to work inside. The sail pulls. The steering oar waits its heavy way at the starboard side near the stern. The swell keeps arriving from far-off weather you will never see. And you stand within the narrow gift of the sailing season, using its pale light for as long as it is willing to remain. The light lowers by such small degrees that, for a while, it seems not to lower at all. The sea keeps its broad grey face. The sail still draws. The hull still speaks in its old language of creak, slap, and wet rubbing timber. And into this sameness comes another kind of thought. Not wind, not swell. Obligation. Even here, with no shore in sight, the voyage belongs to other people as well. A ship like this does not float free of farms, households, bargains, and claims. Timber has been cut. Iron rivets have been forged. Wool has been shorn, spun, woven, and worked into the great square sail above you. Food has been dried. Water casks have been filled. Men have promised labour. Someone of standing has likely promised protection, command, or profit. The sea feels empty, but it is crowded with debts. You know this in the practical way a navigator knows most things, not as a speech, not as a law code recited from memory, more as pressure. If the ship reaches Iceland or Greenland or the home fjord again, then cargo must be counted, news must be carried, gifts may be exchanged, dues may be paid. A voyage can serve trade, settlement, alliance, or the needs of a chieftain. Even an ordinary crossing sits inside a web of obligations that waits quietly on land. In many Norse communities, wealth is not only silver in a chest. It is cloth, it is animals, it is timber, it is the loyalty of followers, it is the ability to outfit a vessel and persuade a crew to trust it. That means your work with direction has value beyond the deckboards beneath your feet. A missed landfall is not just an inconvenience, it can mean spoiled provisions, wasted season, damaged goods, angry partners, and a thinner margin when winter closes the sea. So the mind keeps count while the hands remain calm. How many days out now by your best sense of watches, hunger, light, and distance run? How much fresh water remains? How much patience remains in the crew? Whether the route still feels true enough to justify continuing on the same bearing. There is no clock to consult, no neat written log in the modern way, but there is reckoning all the same, a running measure made from memory. Perhaps there is trade aboard, walrus ivory on some voyages farther west, homespun cloth, iron tools, timber where timber is scarce. Everyday goods that matter more than heroic stories do. Perhaps there are letters carried only in the mind, messages spoken from one farmstead to another, family news, legal news, marriage plans, property claims. Medieval travel often carries many purposes at once. A ship is not just a machine for motion. It is a narrow wooden road laid briefly over cold water, and roads, even floating ones, lead back to power. Kings in the later Viking Age reach farther than before. Local chiefs, assemblies, and law speakers shape life too. Harbour dues, loyalties, obligations of service, and the simple expectation that capable men do their share all settle on the voyage without needing to stand physically on deck. You feel them in the care given to the sail, in the caution around stores, in the unwillingness to waste daylight on a doubtful turn. For a navigator, this pressure remains strangely quiet. No one needs to shout it. It sits in the afterpart of the ship like another crew member. You keep the vessel on its intended way because everyone aboard has invested something that cannot be easily replaced. The sail alone represents an enormous labor of wool and work. The hull carries seasons of craft. The people aboard carry households behind them, so you watch the course with the patience of someone guarding more than direction. The sea darkens a little more. Rope tightens and loosens with the pull of wind. A man farther forward shifts his seat and draws his cloak nearer his shoulders. Someone checks a line once again, not because it has certainly failed, but because routine is cheaper than repair. This too is part of the economy of the voyage. Constant small care. There may be no coins changing hands on deck this evening. No tally stick cut in the spray. Still, the whole passage is made of accounting. Time against distance. Risk against season. Labor against reward. And your part in it is plain. You help turn costly uncertainty into something survivable. Not certainty. The sea does not offer that. Only a better chance of arriving where men on shore expect the bow to appear. The daylight thins further. The talk, if any, stays low and spare. Work settles into habit again. The obligations waiting on land do not disappear. They simply grow quieter as the first hint of evening asks your eyes to begin another kind of reading. As the evening comes on, the sky begins to separate into layers, pale above, darkening at the rim of the sea. a long band of dim silver where light lingers more stubbornly than it seems it should. This is the hour when thought becomes less occupied by sun height and more aware of the old company carried in the mind. Stories, habits, prayers, names spoken softly or not spoken aloud at all. For a Viking Age sailor, belief is not one simple thing. It changes by place and year and household. On some voyages, older gods still live strongly in memory and custom. On others, Christianity has already taken root, slowly and unevenly, through kings, missionaries, traders, marriage ties, and the practical politics of conversion. In many times and places, the sea holds people who know both worlds at once. A man may wear a cross, another may call on Thor, a third may do neither in any formal way, yet still keep every small habit of luck, reverence, and caution that life at sea teaches. You do not need a church building to feel the presence of religion on the water. There are no stone walls around you now, no bell, no painted altar, only wet wood, sailcloth, wool, breath, and the slow lifting dark. Yet faith travels easily because it is carried in bodies, in signs made by the hand, in words remembered from home, in promises formed silently when the weather threatens, and then repeated later out of habit, gratitude, or fear. If this voyage belongs to the later part of the age, it is easy enough to imagine some Christian practice aboard, a quiet prayer before departure, a cross traced on the chest, an appeal to Christ, to Mary, or to a patron saint known through contact with the wider Christian world. Christianity spreads unevenly across Scandinavia, but by the 10th and 11th centuries it is no stranger on northern ships. Even where conversion is new, the old instability of the sea makes room for any help that seems worth asking. And still the older world does not vanish neatly. Stories of Thor, of winds, of fate, of powers older than church walls remain close in language and thought. The exact private beliefs of any one crew are hard to recover now. Much would have differed from ship to ship. Some of what survives in later written sources is shaped by memory and literary habit. So here it is best to stay gentle with certainty, not to place a perfect speech in anyone's mouth, only to notice that men who cross cold, open water rarely do so without carrying some sense of the unseen with them. Perhaps the most ordinary expression of belief is not dramatic at all. Not vows in a storm, not visions, simply the way men grow quieter as night comes, the way they look upward when the first stars break through, the way a name from home or from worship rises in the mind while hands continue with rope and steering. Religion at sea can be as plain as repetition. Morning words, evening words. A familiar formula said because it has been said before and because habit itself steadies the heart. You stand near the stern and feel the ship continue under you. The steering oar remains heavy and patient. The sail has a different sound now in the cooling air. Above, if the cloud permits, the first useful stars begin to show themselves. Polaris, not perfect but helpful, waits above the northern horizon. You look and you measure, and perhaps for one moment measuring and reverence rest side by side without argument. This is often how medieval life works. The practical and the sacred are not neatly kept apart. Bread, weather, childbirth, law, grazing rights, sickness, travel, and prayer all sit close together. A voyage is no different. Reading the Swell does not push out belief. Checking a line does not cancel a whispered appeal for safety. The world is made of causes you can feel and causes you cannot. Someone near midship shifts under a cloak. Another man glances upward, then back to the sail. No sermon follows. No great declaration. The sea remains itself. Cold, darkening, broad beyond any claim. Yet the ship feels for a moment like a small moving parish of its own, or perhaps a small pagan memory, or perhaps a mixture of both, depending on whose silence you listen to. And because this is an ordinary evening rather than a legend, the feeling passes gently back into work. A line is checked, a cup is lifted, a shoulder is rolled to ease its ache. The stars grow clearer where the cloud parts. Your task remains what it has always been: to notice, to remember, to hold the vessel in relation to sky and water for one more stretch of night. The prayer, if there is one, does not change the wind. It simply travels with you into the dark, as steady and undramatic as the ship itself. The prayer, if there is one, travels with you only a little while before another thought takes its place. Not a holy thought this time, a domestic one, a shore thought, a family thought. Night at sea makes room for such things. The work grows quieter between adjustments. The men nearest you speak less. The sail keeps its low pull. Water strokes along the clinker planks with the same patient hand again and again. And in that long sameness, the mind goes home. You do not picture home as a grand hall unless you are a grand man, and most are not. More likely it is a farmstead or a rented holding, or a narrow place near a landing where smoke gathers under the roof before it finds the vent. A bench, worn smooth, wool laid by for mending, a chest with iron fittings, a doorway that lets in more wind than anyone likes in winter. The little ordinary things. Those are what return first. If you have a wife waiting, you may think of her hands at work rather than her face at rest. Medieval life rarely allows one clean image of anyone doing nothing. Hands are easier to remember because hands are always busy. Twisting yarn, scraping a bowl, lifting a child, pulling wet cloth straight, setting fish to dry, measuring out what grain remains. On land, just as at sea, the day is made of repeated motions. If you have children, you may not think of them as sweet little bundles from a painted story. You think of noise, of need, of small shoes that wear through, of coughing in the cold part of the year, of hunger arriving before the stores improve, of quick sleep and quicker waking. A household in the Viking world is not separate from labor. Children, when they are old enough, carry, fetch, watch, learn, and get in the way until they stop getting in the way and become useful. That change comes early, and if you have no wife, no children, no settled hearth that is fully your own, the ship is still tied to family in another sense. Kin may own part of the venture. A brother may expect cloth in return. A mother may be living in the household that depends on what this voyage brings back. A sister may be married into another farm where news of your safe return matters, because trade, alliance, and obligation run through families as tightly as thread through woven wool. In the North Atlantic world, a voyage is rarely only one man's business. That is part of what keeps you awake even when tiredness presses behind the eyes. Land is not waiting in a vague, romantic way. It is waiting with tasks attached. A successful arrival means timber, perhaps, or iron, or cloth, or walrus products in some northern routes, or simply the safe delivery of people and goods whose absence would be noticed. A failed arrival means silence at a doorway where someone had expected to hear footsteps before the season turned. Still, even these thoughts do not need to become dramatic. Most nights they do not. They come and sit beside you like other passengers. You think of who will ask first about the voyage, not what wonders you saw, just whether the crossing was rough, whether anyone was lost, whether the cargo stayed dry, whether the sheep survived if sheep were aboard, whether the sail held, whether prices are better this year. Family questions are often practical because practical questions are another shape of love. Perhaps someone at home understands your work well enough to hear what you mean when you speak of stars hidden 3 nights in a row, or of a swell that kept its line beneath shifting wind, or of birds that appeared at the hour when hope had begun to flatten into routine. Perhaps not. Many kinds of labor are only partly visible to those who do not perform them. A navigator returns with no crafted object in hand, no barrel made, no cloak woven, no field cut clean. Your work leaves fewer proofs. The ship arrives, and that is the proof. For that reason, your place among family may be steady but not grand, useful, regarded, dependent on memory and reputation. In Norse society, skill at sea matters deeply, especially in Iceland, Greenland, and other places tied together by water. But household honor is not built from one talent alone. It is built from reliability over time. Returning when expected if weather allows. Taking a fair share of hardship. Bringing news that can be trusted. Standing by agreements. Remembering who is owed what. Navigation belongs inside that larger web. On some voyages, family may be physically near you even now. Not all northern travel is a warband cutting through legend. Cargo ships, settlement travel, and regional passage could include mixed needs and different kinds of passengers depending on the route and the vessel. A broader nar, more than a narrow longship, is often linked to Atlantic carrying trade and migration. Our quiet picture here borrows from that larger seafaring world, because the surviving evidence does not hand us a perfect single scene for every night watch. So you hold both facts at once. The ship type matters, and the human feeling of being bound to people on shore remains much the same. A gust leans into the sail and brings you back into the body. The wool cloth above shifts its shape with a soft, heavy thrum. Somewhere nearby, someone clears his throat. Another man pulls his cloak tighter and settles against bundled gear, borrowing what rest he can from a hard deck. Sleeping aboard is cramped, exposed, and often damp. Some shelter can be made in fair conditions, perhaps with awning or sailcloth. But comfort is a large word for a small reality. Families on shore sleep no better in bad weather. They simply do it on steadier ground. You think too of what family means after you return. Clothing to mend, rope to dry. Salt worked into every seam of gear. Stories asked for and shortened in the telling. News exchanged with neighbors. Church feasts or local gatherings where arrivals are counted without much ceremony. The voyage slides back into household life the way a blade slides into a sheath. Quietly, as one task among many. That may be the most ordinary truth of all. Even a crossing that spans cold miles and star-led nights is eventually broken down into domestic consequences. More food if trade went well, more worry if it did not. A repaired roof, a marriage portion, rent or dues made easier to meet, a better chance at wintering without shame. In that sense, your family is present in every choice you make out here, though no one stands beside you at the steering place. The clouds move again. A few steady stars remain where you expect them. The bow keeps on through dark water. Home does not come closer quickly enough to feel. It comes closer by small measures, by watches endured, by course remembered, by wake unspooling behind you where no family can see it. And still, the thought of them stays gentle. Not a cry, not a speech, just the low inward knowledge that your skill belongs to more people than yourself. So, the ship goes on. The night goes on. The sea keeps its calm, repeating language against the hull. And somewhere beyond the dark horizon, in houses roofed with turf, board, or thatch, other people settle into their own uneasy sleep, not knowing exactly where you are, only trusting that you are doing what you have done before. Watching, remembering, bringing the vessel, if luck and labor hold together, one little measure nearer to them. by watches endured, by course remembered, by wake unspooling behind you where no family can see it. And still the thought of them stays with you as the hour grows thinner, not loudly, not in a way that interrupts the work, just as a quiet knowledge tucked somewhere under the chill and the salt. Your skill does not belong only to your own hands. It belongs to the people who wait for the cargo or for the news, or simply for the sight of a hull returning where it said it would return. Now, at last, your turn for sleep comes near. It is never a grand event. No one aboard a North Atlantic ship drifts off into comfort as though entering a featherbed. Sleep at sea is smaller than that, narrower, damp around the edges, taken when it can be taken. On some voyages there may be an awning or sailcloth rigged for a little shelter in fair weather, but much of shipboard rest is only partial. A cloak pulled close, a bundle used for a pillow, one shoulder against timber, knees bent because there is not enough room to stretch them kindly. You lower yourself carefully into the place that is available, not the place you would choose. The planks are hard under hip and ribs. The wood gives off the mixed smell it has carried all day. Tar, salt, wet wool, old bilge water, smoke caught in cloth from some earlier shore fire, fish oil from a container not sealed quite well enough. Human closeness too. Not filth exactly, but a long-used nearness, a ship smell, worked into rope and cloak and beard and hand. Around you, other men are already lying still, or trying to. One shifts and the bench creaks. Another coughs into his sleeve. Someone mutters a few words too low to catch. Someone else is asleep quickly from sheer practice, mouth slack, hand still curled as though it remembers a rope. Rest aboard ship is a shared thing, but not a private one. You sleep among elbows, boots, gear, and breathing. The vessel continues to move beneath you. That is the first obstacle. Not fear, simply movement. The hull is clinker-built, the overlapping planks flexing slightly with the sea in the way these ships are meant to do. It is one of the reasons they live so well in rough water, and one of the reasons your body never quite forgets where it is. Even in calm conditions, the ship speaks through small motions. A rise under the shoulders, a pause, a lean, a gentle twist from stern to bow as a new line of water passes under. You do not lie on still ground. You lie inside a long, wooden answer to the sea. The second obstacle is cold, not always severe, but patient. It reaches through damp cloth and settles in the spaces where labor has stopped making heat. While you stand watch, your legs and back are busy enough to hold it off. Once you lie down, the air finds your wrists, your neck, the side of your face. You pull the cloak tighter. Tuck one hand under your arm. Turn your body to keep the wind from taking too much. And then there is sound. The sea is never silent, not even when it is kind. Water rubs and taps along the hull. A rope knocks once, then again, then falls still for a few breaths. The wool sail, if any of it remains set, gives a low working murmur overhead. Timber answers with its own faint complaints. From the stern comes the occasional controlled shift of the steering oar as the man on duty makes a small correction. Not a dramatic turn. Just enough to hold the vessel where memory and sky and swell say it should go. You listen because you cannot help it. A navigator rests, but the body does not fully resign. Part of you is still counting the rhythm of the water. Part of you is still measuring wind without opening your eyes. If a bird cried nearby in darkness, if men suddenly moved with haste, if the sail changed its note, some part of you would wake before thought had arranged itself into words. That half-waking state may be as close to true shipboard sleep as anything else. A dipping in and out, a short fall into dreams. Then, a return to the damp world of rope and plank. Then another little descent. Time is not measured here by clocks. It is measured by the body losing and finding consciousness in fragments, by the changing angle of cold, by the voices of the next watch passing low over you. What you dream, if you dream, is impossible to prove. No Viking sailor leaves behind a careful little manual of his sleeping thoughts. So this part can only be offered gently. Perhaps the mind stays with the ship, turning stars into simple points of labor. Perhaps it wanders inland to a doorway, a byre, a field edge silvered with dew. Perhaps sleep is too shallow for pictures and is only a brief, dark easing of muscles that have braced all day against motion. Your hands still remember work even now. The skin across the palms feels thick where rope has run. The fingers do not uncurl at once. The neck keeps a quiet ache from lifting toward cloud gaps and horizon lines. The eyes, after so much looking into dark distance, seem to go on looking even when shut. Little pale traces drift behind the lids. Not visions, just the ordinary residue of strain. Yet there is relief in lying down, even like this. Relief in surrendering the next stretch of water to another set of shoulders. Life aboard depends on that exchange. No one can watch forever. No one can steer, trim, reckon, and scan without end. The voyage is made not by one unbroken act of attention, but by many human limits joined together. One man wakes, one man sleeps, then the places change. So the root survives the weakness built into every body. Somewhere above the cloak edge, the sky continues whether you watch it or not. If the clouds have opened, Polaris still hangs above the northern line. Useful, but not perfect, a guide rather than a nail fixing heaven in place. Other stars wheel slowly around it. If the sky has closed, then there is only darkness and the felt memory of direction. In either case, the ship does not stop being a ship because your eyes are shut. The sail still draws when wind allows. The bow still meets the next low swell. The men on duty still perform the plain acts that keep all the others from waking to trouble. You drift a little deeper at last. The timber under your cheek is no softer, but your body bargains with it. The cold remains but becomes less personal. The sounds that kept you alert a short while ago flatten into one broad, repeating murmur. Sea, rope, sail, breath, sea again. It is not comfort in the way a house gives comfort. It is only enough, and enough on a voyage like this has great value. Before sleep takes you fully, one last thought passes through, dull and familiar. Dawn will ask for the same things again. Another reading of weather, another feel for swell, another estimate of distance run through unseen water, another day in which certainty remains scarce and skill must stand in for it. But that labor belongs to the next waking. For now, you let the ship carry your weight as it carries the rest. You lie among wet wool, rough planks, and men too tired to speak. The sea keeps on with its patient language under the hull. The stars, seen or unseen, remain where they remain, and your breathing, at last, begins to match the long, unhurried rise and fall beneath you. Sleep does not end cleanly. It thins. The dark behind your eyes grows less complete. The ship is still moving beneath you. That is the first fact of the new day. Before thought, before speech, before you remember your own name or task, the hull reminds you where you are. It lifts, it settles. A plank presses into your shoulder. Damp wool clings cool against your neck. Somewhere close by, a man clears his throat and does not bother to whisper. You wake inside the same narrow world that carried you into sleep. Tar, salt, wet wood, stale breath, the tired animal smell of wool cloaks that have dried badly, and then grown damp again. No bell marks the hour, no clock divides the night from morning. The change comes as a small paling at the edge of the sailcloth, and in the different quality of the cold. You do not rise at once. Few men do. Rest at sea is too scarce to throw away quickly. For a little while you lie still and let your body take account. Your back is stiff. One hand has gone numb under your weight. Your jaw aches faintly from clenching in sleep against the ship's movement. These are not complaints, they are measurements. A navigator begins the day by noticing. Even before you look at sky or water, you notice yourself. Then the work of becoming awake begins. You pull your hand free. You flex your fingers. You shift one knee. The planks answer with a soft complaint. Around you, others are doing the same. A voyage teaches men to move with economy. No one wastes effort on grand stretching or cheerful talk. A cloak is adjusted. A boot is found by touch. Someone gathers a rope coil that drifted in the night. Someone else reaches for the bailer and tips out a little gathered water, because the sea never stops leaving small tasks behind it. When you sit up, the morning meets you all at once. Cold air, grey light, the wool sail hanging heavy but serviceable. The long curve of the ship, dark with damp. The side-mounted steering oar aft, where duty and direction wait for the same familiar hands. The sea has not changed into kindness overnight. It remains itself, patient, lifting, wide. This is the part that repeats most faithfully. Not glory, not discovery, repetition. The same care given again, because it must be given again. Viking seafaring, for all the later stories told about it, depends on this quieter truth. Routes are made real by repeated crossings. Skill survives because bodies perform the same acts over and over until they become a kind of memory deeper than speech. A man learns a course not from one brave moment, but from many ordinary dawns that feel very much like this one. You crawl clear enough to look outward. The horizon is a dark band, then a softer one above it. Clouds lie in pieces. Between them, the last stars are retreating. If the sky has been clear enough during the night, someone has held the ship in relation to the north as well as he could. Knowing the pole star helps, but does not sit exactly fixed in the way later people sometimes imagine. It is a guide, not a nail hammered into heaven. Useful, familiar, not perfect. Very little at sea is perfect. Now stars matter less than light. Morning changes the tools. The sea gives you one set of signs by night and another by day. You feel for the wind on your cheek. You look at the set of the sail. You notice how the swell reaches the hull. This too is part of navigation. Not one lost instrument, not one secret, just a practiced gathering of clues. The body learns to read pressure, sound, angle, and rhythm together. Nearby, one of the crew chews yesterday's bread with the stubborn patience required by hard food and a dry mouth. Another drinks sparingly. Water must be watched. Provisions on a voyage like this are simple and limited. Exact shipboard meals are hard for historians to pin down in detail, but dried food, stored drink, and whatever keeps longest are the ordinary companions of sailors. Breakfast is not an event. It is maintenance. You take your share in the same spirit. A little food, a little drink, enough to wake the stomach and settle the head. Enough to remind you that this body, however tired, still belongs to the ship's work. Crumbs catch in the beard of the man beside you. He wipes them away with the back of his hand and says, almost nothing. Silence in the morning is not solemn, it is efficient. As the light grows, the vessel itself becomes easier to read. Clinker-built planks overlap in neat strakes along the hull, and the whole ship has that slight living flexibility these vessels are known for. They do not resist the sea like rigid boxes. They move with it, they creak, they answer wave and wind with a language of timber strain, rope pull and sail shift. To an untrained passenger, all this movement might feel like confusion. To you, it is information. You listen for what has changed since the night before. Is the wave striking the hull at the same interval? Is the sail drawing cleanly? Has the wind freshened or fallen away? Has the steering required more correction? Dead reckoning, as later sailors would call a related practice, lives in these questions. There is no surviving Viking handbook setting out the full method, step by careful step. So any full reconstruction remains partly a guess. But repeated sea travel across the North Atlantic all but demands some habit of estimating distance, direction, and drift from time, motion, and remembered conditions. Men do not reach Iceland, Greenland, and beyond by wonder alone. A hand rests briefly on the steering arrangement. Another checks a line for chafe. Another looks outward for birds, though none may appear yet. Land signs can take many forms when they come. Watercolor changes, floating weed, smell, bird paths. But most mornings bring no revelation, only water, only sky, only the need to go on noticing. And so the day begins again in the plainest possible way. You wake, you measure the body, you measure the ship, you measure the sky. You accept that certainty is still scarce, and you work without demanding more than the sea will give. Around you, the crew settles back into its shared pattern of labor. Ahead of you lies another stretch of open water, another long sequence of small decisions too ordinary to become legend. The light widens, faces come clearer, hands find their old tasks, and with no ceremony at all, the voyage starts over. The light widens, faces come clearer, hands find their old tasks. And with no ceremony at all, the voyage starts over. By now, the day does not divide itself into neat parts. There is no bell, no clock face, no tidy board marked with hours. Time comes to you through other things. Through the height of the sun when it shows itself. Through the slackening of one man's shoulders. Through the ache in your knees, from bracing against the ship's slow roll. Through hunger returning, not as an event, but as a familiar pressure. This stretch of the voyage is the hardest to speak about because so little happens, and yet it asks for nearly everything you have. The sea in the middle distance offers no edge. The horizon stays where it always stays. The ship remains a moving piece of timber and wool, held together by skill, fastenings, repair, and habit. Its clinker-built planks overlap in long ridges. When the hull meets the water at an angle, those planks answer with their own sounds. A creak, a groan, a light shiver under your feet. Not alarming, just constant. You stand or crouch near the after part of the vessel, where an experienced hand can better feel what the ship is doing. The steering oar, fixed on the starboard side near the stern, remains one of the plain truths of the craft. It is not a later rudder hung at the center. It is a side-mounted control, heavy with wetness and use, asking for attention rather than force. A small correction held too long becomes a larger one than you wanted. A body that stiffens too much grows slow, so you keep yourself loose where you can. Ankles soft, hands ready. Eyes moving but never darting. The sail has its own voice above you. A square of wool, precious almost beyond saying, drinks the wind and complains about it at the same time. The labour in that cloth began far from the sea. Sheep had to be kept. Wool had to be shorn, cleaned, spun, woven, thickened, treated, stitched. A sail like this is wealth. It is also trouble. When it grows wet, it changes. When it stretches, it must be judged again. Men look upward, then to the lines, then back to one another. A little easing here, a little pulling there. No grand command, only maintenance. Most shipboard life is maintenance, and most navigation, in a moment like this, is maintenance too. You are not discovering a continent every morning. You are trying not to lose a line already held in memory. That is a quieter kind of skill, perhaps a harder one for songs to praise. You keep the course not with a magical certainty, but with repeated small acts of noticing. The wind on one cheek, the pull of the sail, the angle of light on the water, the direction of the longer swell under the shorter chop, the length of time since the last clear sight that told you enough. Dead reckoning in a broad sense belongs here, even if no Viking hand leaves behind a neat manual explaining each step. You estimate, you remember. You compare the ship's present behavior to the ship's earlier behavior. You let memory do work that parchment does not. If the sky clears enough, your thoughts return to the night's references and to the sun's path by day. On a good voyage, the heavens are not separate from the sea. They are part of one continuous field of signs. Polaris can help at night, though in this age it does not sit exactly at the pole itself. It is near enough to matter, not perfect enough to worship. In daylight, the sun's height and course matter too, especially on known northern routes where mariners may have cared about keeping roughly within a familiar band across the ocean. Exactly how formal that practice was is still argued over. Some scholars imagine simple shadow tools or boards. A weathered wooden fragment from Greenland has often been pulled into that discussion. It may have belonged to a navigational aid. It may not. The sea does not answer the debate. So for now you work with what is firm. The visible sky when it appears, the remembered route, the moving water, and the body trained to compare them. The body is easy to overlook in stories about finding direction, but the body is the instrument that cannot be laid down. Your feet read the deck. Your skin reads the wind before your words do. Your ears learn the difference between an easy slap of wave against hull and the harder strike that hints at a shift in angle. Even smell enters the work. Salt is always there, old and ordinary. Tar and damp wool stay near it. Sometimes there is only that mixture and nothing more. Sometimes, if fortune bends your way, another note arrives. Weed, mud, cold stone, bird droppings carried from some unseen roost. None of these signs is a promise, but each one joins the count. The men around you help without speaking much. Viking seafaring, if we call it that from a distance, rests in practice on crews, on shared labor, on repetitions learned together. One man bails, another checks a line that has rubbed too long at the wrong angle. Another shifts a bundle so weight sits better in the hull. On broader cargo ships, especially Nars, the burden of goods changes the feel of everything. On longships, speed and crew weight matter differently. But in either case, the sea punishes neglect before it punishes ignorance. So the useful man is often the boring man, the one who notices wear before failure, the one who recoils the rope, the one who does not let hunger make him careless. Your own meal, when it comes, barely interrupts the work. Shipboard food on these voyages must be imagined from wider Norse food habits, more than from tidy menus preserved at sea. So certainty is limited. Still, simple provisions are beyond doubt. Dried food, stored food, fresh water guarded because there is no spring to refill it from. You chew slowly because chewing is what the day allows. Salt dries your lips. The cup passes. A joke may pass with it, thin as thread. Then work closes over the space again. By afternoon, if this word can even be trusted out here, sameness becomes almost physical. It rests on the deck like another layer of weather. The ship rises, falls, rises, falls. The sea does not care whether you are alert or tired. It keeps one motion, then another, wearing thought down to practical size. This too is part of the navigator's life. Not constant revelation, not an unbroken chain of insight, just attention held for so long that attention itself feels plain. And yet plain attention is what joins Norway to Iceland, Iceland to Greenland, settlement to settlement, family to family. Repeated crossings in the Viking Age are real enough. Archaeology and later written tradition agree on that much, even if the exact texture of each watch must be rebuilt with care. So you remain where the ship most clearly speaks through wood, sail, and water. You keep receiving small signals. You keep sorting them. You keep the vessel in relation to wind, swell, and sky as best you can. Nothing about the labor asks to become legend. The day continues in this modest way. A little adjustment, a little waiting, a little looking northward when the sky permits, a little listening through the hull. No shore yet, no revelation, only the long middle water and your place within it, patient as rope, tired as wool, and steady enough to go on. Only after many hours of sameness do the smallest changes begin to matter more than the stars. The sea is still the sea. The sail is still heavy with salt. The planks still answer the water with their old creaking speech. And yet, your attention starts to lean outward in a new way. Not upward now toward gaps in cloud, not inward toward the remembered count of distance. Outward, towards signs that belong less to open water and more to the edges of land. This is not a sudden sighting. It is not the kind of moment later stories enjoy. No dark coast rises all at once from the horizon. No one points and shouts. On a real crossing, especially in northern waters, land often arrives first as a collection of hints too small to trust by themselves. You notice one, then another, and then you wait to see whether they begin to agree. A bird passes low over the water. Not one of the great open sea birds that can wander far from shore without concern, but a smaller creature whose direction makes you think. Medieval sailors in many places paid attention to birds, and later northern tradition remembers the releasing of birds to seek land. How often that was done on every voyage is harder to say. But watching them, yes. Watching costs nothing, so you watch. The bird does not explain itself. It moves on in a line that might mean something or might mean only its own small business. Still, once your mind has turned toward land, every living thing in the air takes on a little weight. Another shape appears later, then another. Not a cloud of them, just enough to trouble the emptiness. The water changes too, though slowly. In deep ocean, the color has one kind of cold depth. Near shoaler places, or where currents carry different matter, the sea can shift in tone. Not every change means a coast. Drift, weather, and light can all deceive the eye. But a navigator does not ask a sign to be perfect. You ask only whether it belongs with the others. You let it sit beside the birds. You let it sit beside the swell you have been feeling all day. You let it sit beside the way the wind has held or failed to hold. There may be weed as well, a torn ribbon of sea growth, a smell that is not exactly soil, not exactly rot, but something thicker than the clean, hard breath of open water. People often speak of smelling land as if it were a miracle. In truth, it would be faint, uncertain, mixed with tar, wet wool, stale breath, and bilge. But faint does not mean useless. Faint things are the whole trade. The job has always been to listen when the world speaks quietly. The crew feels it before anyone says much. Men begin to look away from their own hands more often. A man adjusting a line pauses a moment longer than needed. Another squints into the same grey distance he has ignored for half a day. Hope does not arrive as excitement. It arrives as restlessness held under habit. Nobody wants to spend his strength on joy too early. Sea crossings teach a plain kind of caution. A thing is not near because you wish it near, so you keep the ship honest. That is the work. Not dreaming of shore, but keeping the vessel in good relation to the clues now gathering around it. The steering oar remains your companion at the stern, broad-bladed and stubborn, pressing back through the water. A longship or a broader seagoing vessel will answer differently depending on its load and shape, but either way, you feel correction through your arms before you can put it into words. The hull flexes. The square wool sail draws and eases. Rope tightens, then gives a little. The whole ship remains a body of signals. If this voyage follows a route known from repeated passage, then remembered bearings matter now as much as ever. Voyages to Iceland and Greenland were not one-time wonders. They happened often enough to create habits, expectations, and route law. That does not make them easy. It only means you are not trying to invent the ocean from nothing. You are trying to remain within a band of experience handed from one crossing to the next, from older hands to newer ones, from spoken instruction to muscle memory. And yet, even on known routes, certainty comes late. You may think of the stories written down later with their sailing directions from one land to another. Such texts preserve something real about route knowledge, though they were recorded after the Viking Age and must be handled carefully. Out here, what they become is simpler than literature. Keep this relation to north. Keep this feel of swell. Run on this wind while it holds. Look for birds. Look for weed. Look for water that is no longer quite the same. Cloud drifts over again, and the sky closes. That old ceiling of grey lowers above you with no concern for human plans. In such weather, the stars are gone from use, and the sun as well. The ship goes on under gathered experience instead. This is where modern people often want a hidden device, some lost certainty tucked in a pouch. Perhaps some crews did use aids we still debate, like a shadowboard or crystal, and perhaps not. The evidence is too thin to let the object do all the work. What survives more clearly is the labor itself. Looking, comparing, waiting, correcting. A navigator in these waters is less the owner of a secret tool than a person trained into patience. That may be the plainest truth of all. You do not command the sea into clarity. You let many small things accumulate until they begin, gently, to lean one way. By now, the light has changed again. It is difficult to measure time exactly aboard ship because there is no mechanical clock to divide the day into obedient parts. But your body marks passage well enough. Hunger returns in a dull, familiar way. Your knees stiffen. Salt dries and dampens again on your sleeves. The men around you move with the slower care of those who have been balancing for too long. Then, at last, one sign begins to repeat rather than merely appear. Birds again. Not one stray life-crossing emptiness, but a little traffic. Not crowded, not dramatic. Just enough pattern to deserve respect. Their movement has direction. Their presence has rhythm. And once a pattern repeats, you can begin to shape your choices around it. No one needs to speak loudly. A few words pass. A chin lifts. A hand points briefly and then returns to work. The sail is watched. The heading is held, then trimmed. You do not chase the signs like a desperate man. You receive them. You weigh them. You let them alter the ship by degrees. Somewhere ahead, still hidden by distance and weather, there may be a coast low on the world. A place of turf roofs, grazing animals, smoke, stones, and people who have also measured life by wind and water. But that belongs to the next stretch of the day. For now there is only this quieter threshold, when open sea begins to loosen its grip and the first shy signs of land move through air and water around you. You stay with them. You keep the vessel steady, and the long middle water, so empty for so long, begins at last to feel slightly less alone. The signs thicken so slowly that, for a while, you almost doubt they are thickening at all. A bird passes, then another, lower than before. The water changes from one kind of dark to another, not brighter, not friendlier, just less endless. The swell that has ruled your body for so many days begins to meet something else now, some quieter interruption far ahead, too distant to see clearly and yet already present in the way the ship rises and settles. You do not greet this with joy. Not at first. Joy is loud, and loud feelings are poor tools on a working ship. Instead, you grow more exact. Land is not the end of labour. Land is often the moment when labour sharpens. Open water allows broad mistakes. A coast does not. A hidden skerry, a low reef, a sudden cross-current near shore, all can punish a crew that relaxes too soon. So you keep watching. You hold the vessel in relation to the wind as carefully as before. The steering oar still asks for the same patient pressure. The wool sail still tugs and breathes overhead, full of damp weight and old effort. Its surface is never still. It shivers, fills, eases, and fills again. Every motion travels into rope, mast, hull, shoulder, palm. The men around you begin to look outward more often. Heads turn, eyes narrow toward the rim of the world. Someone points once and is ignored. Someone points again and receives a longer look. Nothing is confirmed. At sea, a cloud can pretend to be land, for longer than pride likes to admit. So no one rushes to name the coast. Naming can wait. Keeping the ship right cannot. You notice the air before you trust your eyes. It carries a smell not found far offshore, not strong, not warm, only a faint mixed scent beneath the salt. Damp earth, perhaps. Kelp, perhaps. Wet stone. The kind of smell that seems to arrive in pieces, then vanish, then return more firmly, as if it has made up its mind. This too is part of navigation. Not grand wisdom, not magic. Just a tension held long enough that small differences become useful. On repeated North Atlantic routes, sailors likely learned and passed on this kind of noticing, as much as any spoken bearing. There is no surviving Viking handbook that tells you exactly how one navigator described such moments to another. But repeated crossings to Iceland and Greenland means some culture of trained watching must have existed, even if much of it lived only in memory, practice, and the body. The hull sounds different now. The waves no longer strike with quite the same even distance between them. There is a new confusion in the water, a crossing of motions. The clinker-built planks answer with their familiar creak, flexible and alive under strain. But the rhythm has changed enough for you to feel it through your feet. The seafloor is still far below, no doubt, yet the water has begun to behave like water with a place to go. A man is sent forward to watch more closely. Another tends the line of the sail. If this vessel carries cargo as well as people, minds turn toward what must happen once shore is found. Unloading, barter, shelter, repair, news, and counting losses small enough not to be spoken of as losses. Water casks may be low. Clothing smells of old salt and damp wool. Hands are nicked, swollen, cracked pale at the knuckles. The promise of land is not romance. It is grass under sore feet. Fresh water if fortune allows. Smoke from other households. Trade, perhaps. Obligation, certainly. Still, before all that comes the approach, and the approach is slow. You look again for birds. Near land, their paths can matter. Literary sources mention mariners using birds to seek coast. though the exact shipboard routine is hard to pin down with certainty. What is less doubtful is the common sense behind it. A bird that feeds far out may tell you little. A bird flying with purpose at the right hour may tell you more. You do not ask one sign to do all the work. You let each sign join the others. At last the horizon holds its shape. What first seemed a cloud remains where a cloud should have changed. Low, dark, uneven. It does not rise like weather. It sits. The line beneath it steadies. A coast then, or something close enough to deserve the same caution. No cheer follows, only a release too modest to hear. Shoulders drop a little. Conversation returns in fragments. One man wets his lips. Another adjusts his cloak. The ship herself keeps on, narrow and work-worn, carrying everyone toward the harder precision of near water. Now, your task becomes less about finding a broad world direction and more about reading a particular place. You search for breaks in the shore, for an inlet perhaps, for lower ground that may mark a beach or landing place, for smoke, which means people, for a gentler arrangement of water where a hull may come in without striking hidden stone. The colour of the sea can change over shoals. The birds may gather differently near a headland. Kelp may show where current moves over shallower ground. All of this must be read while the ship still moves, while the sail still pulls, while fatigue makes every judgment slightly heavier than it should be. That is the quiet burden of skill. The work does not come only when the body is fresh. The steersman and the other experienced hands matter especially now. Viking ships used a side-mounted steering oar on the starboard side near the stern, not a central rudder, and in these moments that arrangement asks for practiced coordination. A small correction can travel slowly through the hull. A stronger turn asks the sea for room. The vessel is quick compared with heavier craft, but it is not a thought. It cannot pivot on hope. The shore grows less doubtful. You begin to separate dark mass into parts. A slope, a lighter strip beneath it. Stone or beach, you cannot yet say. Perhaps turf beyond, perhaps only rock washed pale by weather. If there are houses, they do not yet show themselves. If there are animals grazing, they are still too small for the eye. But the world ahead is no longer only guessed. You do not become less tired when land appears. In some ways, you become more tired because the body has been holding itself ready for this very change. Yet with the tiredness comes a steadier feeling. Not triumph, only nearness. After so much open water, nearness is enough. So you keep your gaze forward. You listen to the altered sea. You smell the thin thread of coast on the wind. You guide the ship not into safety exactly, but toward the next, smaller set of decisions. And as the dark line of land slowly thickens into a real place, the ocean behind you begins, at last, to feel like a distance already being left behind. The line of land thickens until it is no longer a rumour at the edge of sight. It becomes slope, stone, and dark strips of turf. Then, little by little, it becomes work. Nearness always does. The open sea lets go of you only by asking for new attention. You do not rush toward shore. A tired crew that rushes is a danger to wood, sail, and bone. Instead, you come in carefully, feeling your way through smaller waters. The swell changes first. It no longer moves in the same broad, patient rhythm that carried the ship through open distance. It meets shoals and hidden stone. It folds back on itself. The hull answers with a different sound, less deep lifting, more short, uneven knocking beneath the clinker planks. You keep watching the colour of the water. In clear places, it can tell you something. Deep water holds one tone. Shallower ground turns another. Seaweed stains it dark in drifting patches. Foam gathers and breaks where the sea complains against rock. None of this gives certainty. It only gives hints. At sea, hints are often enough. The steering oar on the starboard side needs a gentler hand now, not a stronger one. Small movements matter more than large ones. A little too much, and the stern drifts where it should not. A little too little, and the ship keeps a line that belonged to deeper water a few moments ago. You feel each correction through the timber, through your wrist, through the tired back of your shoulders. The ship has crossed a great space, but this last narrow part asks for its own kind of skill. Other eyes help. They have to. One man watches the water ahead. Another listens for the order to ease a line. Someone else stands ready near the anchor gear, if this vessel carries one fit for the coast you have reached, or else ready to help with mooring lines and a careful beaching, if that suits the landing place better. Viking Age ships did not all arrive ashore in one single manner. Some anchor, some are brought toward a strand, some are steadied by crew stepping down into bitter water when the depth permits. The exact sequence changes with ship type, weather, coast, and need. That uncertainty belongs to the truth of it. What does not change is the feeling of everyone becoming busy at once in a very controlled way. The sail that carried you so far must now be made smaller, quieter, less powerful. Wool has weight even when dry, and after days of wet and salt, it feels heavier still. Hands go up to lines that have already rubbed skin raw. The yard must be managed without foolishness. If the wind catches the cloth at the wrong moment near shore, the ship can sheer off or swing in a way no one wants. So the work is slow by necessity. The great sail loses some of its pull. Its sound softens from a full living strain to a restless flap, and then to something looser, more manageable. Rope creaks, wet fibers tighten, a peg is shifted, a line is passed hand to hand. Nothing here is grand, it is only practiced. That is better. By now you can smell the land clearly. Not just the imagined thread that drifted over the sea before, but the close smell of wet earth, trampled grass, dung smoke and seaweed left to dry and rot along the margins of the shore. To people on land, these smells may say little. To a crew finishing a crossing, they say almost everything. They say soil instead of only salt. They say shelter that does not move. They say water that may be fetched by bucket instead of saved by measure. Birds seem less mysterious close in. Far from shore, they are signs. Here they become themselves again, busy and noisy and concerned with their own feeding. Their ordinary life is oddly comforting. So is the sight of smoke lifting straight up from a distant roof hole when the air is calm enough. Smoke means fuel. Fuel means people. People mean trade, talk, rules, favors, watchfulness, and perhaps a place to rest. Land does not end labor. It only changes it. The anchor, if dropped, goes with more hope than certainty. It is not a neat modern thing. In the Viking world, anchors could be wooden frames weighted and fitted to grip the bottom, or stones and other practical forms depending on place and period. Holding ground matters. So does luck. You wait to feel whether the ship settles back and stays. If the bottom is poor, if the line drags, if the wind shifts, all your nearness can begin to move away again. So even now, you do not trust too quickly. If instead the ship is brought toward a beach or shallows, the work has its own quiet strain. Men prepare to jump into cold water at the right moment, not too soon and not too late. They brace, shove, guide, and keep the hull from slewing broadside where waves could trouble it. Boots fill, legs go numb, mud takes hold of feet. The grand North Atlantic crossing ends, for some knee-deep in brown water, while lifting a rope over one shoulder. That too is part of the real thing. When at last the vessel is secure enough to stop thinking of every heartbeat as a navigational problem, the relief is not loud. Nobody becomes a saga all at once. You do not throw your arms upward to the sky. More likely you stand in place for a breath longer than before, because your body has not yet understood that it may be still. The deck still seems to move under you. The ears still wait for the next command. The hands remain half-curled from wood, rope, and steering pressure. Around you, the ship begins to change from a creature underway into a wooden place full of tasks. Cargo must be checked, water casks judged, sail inspected for fresh wear, oars, if used near shore, put back in order. Bilge water may still need bailing. Personal things that seemed unimportant in mid-passage begin to matter again. A cloak dried if the weather allows, a food bag found, a knife returned to its place. Little acts of landfall, little proofs that the crossing is ending. And yet the sea does not leave you at once. The salt is in your clothes. The pitch smell lives in the planks. Your balance still belongs partly to open water. Even in shelter, you keep listening for movement. That is the quiet after-work of navigation. Not glory, not revelation. Only the slow unwinding of attention after many days of keeping ship, sky, swell, and memory tied together. So you stay with the vessel a little longer while the coast stands near and solid at last. The lines are checked once more. The hull answers with smaller sounds now. Wood against water, rope against wood. A low complaint, then rest. The distance behind you has not vanished. It has simply become a route completed one more time by ordinary skill, shared labor, and patience enough to keep going until the shore could finally be touched. The ship is quiet enough now that other sounds begin to return. Water laps against the hull in shorter breaths. A line knocks softly against wood. Somewhere farther along the shore, you hear the muffled call of people who are busy with their own landing. Not shouting. Only the plain sounds of work beginning again on firm ground. You do not leave at once. That is one more small truth of arrival. Reaching land is not the same as being finished. The sail has to be seen to. The steering oar rests easier now, but it still needs watching. Gear has shifted during the voyage and wants setting right before anyone climbs away from it. So you stay a little longer in the stern space where you have spent so many hours measuring sky, water, and direction by habit. From here, the coast looks less like an answer and more like another set of tasks. The slope above the landing place is grey-brown with stone and thin grass. Beyond it stand a few low buildings, turf-roofed and quiet under the weather. Smoke lifts from one of them in a narrow thread. There is no grand welcome in it, only warmth somewhere inland, only cooking perhaps, only people who already know that ships come in tired and leave tired. At last, you shift your weight, feel the stiffness in your knees, and step toward the side. The movement from deck to shore is small, but your body treats it as strange. For days, the ship has answered every step with motion of its own. Now, the stones underfoot are solid and irregular at the same time. They do not rise to meet you. They do not sink away. For a few moments, the stillness feels almost as unsteady as the sea. Other hands are already at work carrying what must be carried first. Water casks if they need filling. Bundles kept dry as well as anyone could keep them dry. Sail gear that wants spreading, checking, or mending before salt stiffens it further. On a voyage like this, the great wool sail is never just cloth. It is labor stored in woven form. Sheep, shearing, washing, carding, spinning, weaving, sewing, dressing with grease and care. So when it is lowered and managed ashore, it is handled with the weary attention one gives to a thing too valuable to neglect. You help with the ordinary sorting, not as a hero returning from a far horizon, more as one practiced worker among others. Coils of rope are laid where they can dry a little if the weather allows. A bailer, so familiar in the hand aboard ship, looks smaller once set down on land. Chests or sacks are judged by weight before anyone commits to lifting them. Wet wood smells stronger near shore, mixed with seaweed, mud, and the faint sour note of old fish from the landing place. There may be a boathouse nearby, or only a place above the tide line where gear can be set for a time. Conditions differ from harbour to harbour, and much about the exact sequence depends on ship type, cargo, weather, and local custom. That is the quiet difficulty with reconstructing a navigator's full day. We know Norse ships crossed and recrossed these waters. We know crews worked in practiced groups. But no complete shipboard manual survives to tell you each motion in order. So this moment is built from what ships require, what shore landings require, and what tired people always do when they have finally stopped moving. You notice how quickly attention changes shape. At sea, your thoughts stretch outward. Wind, star, swell, distance. Here they shorten into handwork. Where to place the line. Which bundle should stay covered? Whether the hull sits well enough for the tide and bottom beneath it. A navigator's mind does not shut off. It folds inward. It begins keeping account of smaller things. Someone asks, perhaps with a nod, more than with many words, what you make of the weather. That question follows you from sea to shore because the voyage is never fully absent. If clouds are building in a certain quarter, the sail may need better shelter. If wind is shifting, the anchorage may want another look before evening. Your answer is probably plain, not prophecy, only signs. The air feels thicker. The wind has eased. The sea outside the inlet may rise later. Men who sail often do not need speeches. A few words are enough. When the worst of the unloading pauses, there is finally room for the body to admit what it has been postponing. Your shoulders have held themselves against motion for so long that they resist relaxing. Your hands remember rope even when empty. The skin of your face feels drawn by salt. If you bend, your back complains in a low, steady way. None of this is unusual. The voyage ends not in celebration, but in aches made ordinary by repetition. Food comes into thought now with greater force than before. At sea, meals are what can be managed. Simple preserved food, dried things, stored things, enough to keep labour going. On land, even plain fare seems fuller. A bowl handed over near a hearth, something warm, something that does not taste of cask and damp wood. We cannot always say exactly what waits at each landing place, and shipboard menus are partly reconstructed from wider Norse diet, rather than neat records made on deck. Still, the change matters. Warmth matters. Fresh water matters. Bread or porridge or broth matters. Before any rest truly begins, you look back once more at the vessel. The hull sits where you left it, flexing only gently now. Clinker planks overlap in their familiar lines, each board holding its place with the others as it has held through the crossing. The ship seems smaller from shore, though you know well enough how much sea it can carry beneath it. That is another trick of landfall. Once ground is under your feet, the open water starts to feel impossible very quickly, as if those long nights and measured headings belong to some thinner world just beyond the headland. Yet the voyage does not vanish. It stays in the habits it has carved into you. Even on shore, your eye keeps drifting to the sky. You note the cloud cover without meaning to. You mark the wind on your cheek. You listen, out of long practice, for any change in the water's tone against timber. A navigator arrives but does not entirely stop navigating. The senses remain tuned a little while longer, like rigging that still trembles after the sail has been eased. By late in this part of the day, the work has softened from urgent to necessary. The ship is secure enough, The first gear is sorted. The coast, which for so long was only a hope made of smell and shadow, has turned into real ground, real labour, real damp grass under boots. You move among these smaller tasks without haste. Arrival has no trumpet in it, only rope set down, cloth spread, water fetched, a glance at the weather, a slow breath taken on land that no longer drifts beneath you. And little by little, the sea releases you, not all at once, only in small mercies, in the way your stance widens less, in the way your hands stop anticipating the next pull of line, in the way the world becomes still enough, at last, for tiredness to settle where it belongs. The ground is still strange under your feet. It does not lift. It does not drop. It only receives your weight and keeps it. After so many days of answering the sea, that simple steadiness feels almost richer than food. So when the first pressing tasks are done, when cargo is covered, lines are checked, and the ship lies quieter in its anchorage, you follow the others inland a little way. Not far, only as far as the place where prayer belongs. In some ports that may be a timber church with dark boards and a low door. In earlier years or in rougher landings, devotion may be smaller and less built, folded into habit and spoken words rather than a stone floor. The exact shape changes from place to place and century to century. But the pause itself is easy to imagine. After danger, people make room for thanks. You go with salt stiff in your clothes. Your hair still smells of wet rope and smoke. Your hands carry the memory of steering pressure even now, though the steering oar is behind you on the ship. You are on land, but not fully on land yet. Part of you is still leaning with the swell. The building, if there is one here, is dim after the pale outdoor light. Your eyes need a moment. The air is warmer than the wind outside. It holds smells that do not move much. Wax, damp wool, old timber, earth brought in on boots. Perhaps there is a little smoke trapped high in the rafters. Perhaps a faint smell of tallow from lamps. Nothing dramatic. Only the close smell of many ordinary bodies trying to be still. You duck your head beneath the lintel and let the quiet take over from the sea. That is one of the great differences between water and worship. At sea, every silence has motion under it. Here, silence can stand upright by itself. You do not arrive as a hero. No one does. A successful crossing is important, but it is also work. Repeated work. In the North Atlantic world, where settlements depend on ships for timber, iron, cloth, news, people, and law, safe arrival matters very much. But it is not rare enough to become legend every time. It is part of the structure of life. Iceland, Greenland, Norway, the islands between them, all are tied together by hulls, sails, memory, and seasons. So the thanks you give is not the thanks of a single, astonishing event. It is the quieter thanks of being carried through one more necessary passage. You stand, or kneel, or simply bow your head with the others, depending on local custom and what your knees can bear after days on damp planks. The prayer is plain, not polished for an audience, not performed. A request remembered from childhood, a phrase learned from a priest, a crossing of the chest, a low murmur. For much of the Viking Age, religious life is changing unevenly from region to region. In some communities, Christian practice is firm. In others, it overlaps with older habits, older fears, older ways of asking the world for mercy. A sailor can live close to both memory and change. Out on open water, certainty of any kind is a thin thing. So perhaps your gratitude is directed through Christian words. Perhaps it is coloured by older custom as well, by the long habit of treating wind, sea, and fate with caution rather than confidence. Historians can trace the broad movement of conversion, but the exact inner shape of one sailor's prayer is harder to know. What is certain is the need. Men who cross cold water in wooden ships do not need abstract lessons to teach them dependence. You feel it now in your shoulders, in the small tremor left behind in your hands, in the soreness at the base of your spine where long standing at the stern has settled into muscle. The body prays too, in its own plain language, not through holiness perhaps, but through relief. A voice speaks from the front, low, measured, familiar to those who hear it often, half familiar to those who spend more time under sail than indoors. You do not need every word to feel the pattern. Rise, bow, listen, answer, pause. The order itself is a comfort. At sea, the world resists order. Wind shifts, cloud closes. A wave strikes from a slightly wrong angle. A rope swells with wet and behaves differently in your hand. But here, the same words return in the same shape. The same prayer can be spoken in many seasons. It does not care whether the swell is crosswise or following. You notice small things because the journey has trained you to. Water dripping from a cloak hem onto beaten earth. A child shifting from one foot to the other. A man beside you smelling of sheep and lanolin rather than tar. The rasp of wool sleeves when someone folds their arms. The little cough held back and then released. Even on shore, your craft remains attention. There may be an offering if the voyage has been kind enough, and the cargo promises profit, not lavish. Seafaring wealth is never as simple as people ashore imagine. Ships are costly, sails are labor. Crews must eat. Goods are promised to others before they are unloaded. But a little wax, a little coin, a little pledged support to a church or priest can mark safe return. In some places, the greater offering is simply attendance, the public fact of having come back alive. And in this room, your survival becomes social again. At sea, much of your attention narrows to line, horizon, weather, and the next correction. On shore and under a roof, you are folded back into a larger fabric. You are one man among neighbors, traders, kin, rivals, servants, landholders, children, old women with watchful eyes, people who remained dry while you drifted under stars. They look at your face and know from the beard growth, the salt stains and the tiredness around your mouth that the crossing has been real. You look at theirs and remember why root knowledge matters, not for glory, for this, for making sure the world continues to meet itself. When the prayer ends, no great feeling needs to arrive. Sometimes relief is enough. Sometimes tiredness is stronger than reverence. Sometimes the mind wanders toward practical things waiting outside. Water casks, trade talk, repairs, sleep. Medieval devotion, like medieval labor, is lived by ordinary people with sore backs and crowded thoughts. That too is part of the truth. So you step back out into the air. The light seems wider now. The sky sits high and untroubled above the anchorage. Your ship is still there, riding gently. A worked thing among worked things. The mast stands. The sail is furled. The hull that carried you over long grey water has become, for a little while, only another shape near shore. You breathe in grass, mud, distant seaweed, and the faint, sour sweetness of animals somewhere beyond the houses. The smell of land is busy compared with open water. Layered, close, full of ownership. Fences, paths, smoke, dung, cooking, turf, wet wool. 1,000 small claims replacing one great emptiness. And with the prayer behind you, the day turns again toward human nearness, toward voices at arm's length, toward food taken sitting down, toward kin, if kin are here. Toward the long, slow work of becoming a man on shore again, before the sea asks once more. You do not go far at first. After open water, even a short walk through packed earth and grass feels full and crowded. The ground does not give beneath you the way a deck does. It keeps its promise. Fence posts stand still. Doorways remain where they are put. Smoke rises almost straight in the milder air between houses, and each smell seems to belong to one hearth, one shed, one pot, one life. If kin are waiting here, they do not rush towards you as in a tale meant to stir the heart. Medieval meetings are often quieter than that. People have work in their hands. A child may stare first, uncertain whether the salt dark figure coming up from the shore is father, brother, uncle, or simply another wet man from another ship. A woman may keep kneading, spinning, scraping, or minding the fire even while her eyes measure whether you are thinner than before. Homecoming is not always an empty room suddenly filled. More often it is labor making space, inch by inch, for another body returned. You duck beneath a low lintel or pause in the yard near the door. Your cloak smells of tar, stale wool, and sea. The house smells of old smoke caught in rafters, warm broth, damp clothing, and people who have slept indoors for many nights in a row. There is no grand speech to bridge these worlds. Someone takes a bundle from your hand. Someone asks, perhaps, who else has landed? Someone wants to know whether the weather turned bad, whether a certain man is safe, whether goods arrived sound, whether word came from Iceland or Norway or farther west. News travels with people because it has no faster legs. So you stand there while shore life gathers around you in plain questions. Not heroic questions, small ones. Did the sail hold? Did the ship lose anything overboard? Is flour dearer there than here? Has someone married while you were gone? Did a sheep die? Did a roof leak? Is the summer proving kind enough? These are the real cords that tie a sailor back to land. Not songs, not glory. Price, weather, kin, and repairs. If there are children, they notice what the sea has done to you before they know how to say it. Your beard is salted. Your skin is darkened by wind. Your hands are cracked around the nails. You move differently. Even sitting down takes a moment of thought because part of you still expects the floor to slide away. A small hand may touch the coarse edge of your sleeve, then retreat. Another may ask what you saw. The answer, if you give one, is disappointing in the old, honest way. Water, cloud, birds, more water. A little ice far off, perhaps, or whales surfacing at a distance, or the back of a wave lifting under moonlight. The sea resists neat storytelling. Much of it is repetition noticed by trained eyes. Food comes if the household can spare it. Perhaps a bowl of broth. Perhaps bread gone hard and softened again. Perhaps dried fish, curds, or porridge. Exact meals at sea and on shore shift by region and season, and the little details are often reconstructed from wider Norse food habits rather than preserved menus. But the feeling is clear enough. To eat under a roof, sitting still with a vessel that does not tilt in your hand, is its own deep comfort. The spoon does not need guarding from a sudden roll of water. The steam rises upward instead of slanting in the wind. You listen while others speak. That is part of returning too. A navigator carries route memory, but he has missed the small inland route of daily life. Who borrowed a tool? Who quarrelled over meadow rights? Who has gone to another farm for the season? Which neighbour lost a cow? Which timber must be replaced before colder weather? There is church business perhaps, or assembly talk, or some tax or due that cannot be put off simply because the sea has taken your time. Even in a world held together by ships, the shore keeps its own patient list of demands. Status sits oddly on a returned sailor. At sea, experience matters sharply. Men listen when you judge the wind, the swell, the set of the sail, the shape of coast through haze. Ashore, that authority narrows again. Here, the dairy still needs skimming. The byre still needs mucking. The loom still waits. The roof still leaks where it leaked before. If you belong to a farm household, your worth returns to the broader measure of what your hands can do among everyone else's hands. Seafaring skill matters very much. It simply does not exempt you from ordinary life. Perhaps some goods are brought in from the ship or counted where they lie. Broad cargo vessels, especially Nars, carried the heavy burden of Atlantic trade and settlement, while longships served other needs better. Yet whatever the exact hull that brought you, somebody must still account for what has arrived. Cloth must be kept dry. Timber, iron, walrus products, homespun, meal, tools or smaller trade goods must be watched, divided, stored, promised onward. A voyage does not end when land is sighted. It ends slowly through lifting, counting, drying, thanking, and telling. As the light lowers, you begin to feel the true weight of being among your own walls again, or among the walls of allies and kin if this is not your main home. Privacy in the modern sense is rare. A medieval household is full of shared air, shared benches, shared bedding spaces, shared noise. Yet after the exposed width of sea, even crowded shelter feels close and merciful. The sound of animals outside, the scrape of wood on wood, a pot lid shifting, a baby fussing and then settling, someone pulling off wet shoes near the door. These are not interruptions. They are proof that you are enclosed once more inside human routine. There may be affection, of course, but it often lives in action more than speech. A place made near the fire. Dryer cloth found for your shoulders. A bowl filled again without comment. A question saved for later because your eyes are heavy. A child allowed to lean against your knee. A wife, sister, mother, brother, or aging father glancing once to be sure you are truly here and not only another report from another landing. In this world, tenderness has work clothes on, and slowly, while the room dims and the fire settles red, the sea begins to loosen its hold one last little bit. Not completely. That takes time. Tomorrow there will still be a faint sway in your body when you stand too quickly. Tonight, you still hear water in the back of your mind. But the house goes on breathing around you. People speak, then fall quiet. Someone mends, someone chews, someone yawns, and you sit among them, no longer a figure cut against horizon and spray, but only one more tired person returned in time to share the evening. That is enough, more than enough, for this hour. The voyage has narrowed at last into the oldest harbour there is. Not a bay, not a pier. A household making room for you again, with broth, questions, smoke, and the ordinary mercy of being expected somewhere on land. The house grows quieter by small degrees, not all at once. One voice stops, then another. A wooden bowl is stacked. A bench shifts against the floor. Someone stirs the embers so they will hold a little heat into the night. After that, there is mostly the low sound of breathing, the dry whisper of wool, and the occasional soft complaint of the building itself as it settles in the dark. You are back on land, but land does not fully have you yet. When you rise to loosen your cloak or move nearer the wall, your body still expects the deck to answer. Your stance widens for a moment before you remember there is no need. The floor does not lift. It does not fall. It keeps its promise beneath your feet. Even so, some small part of you continues to listen for the long, patient rhythm of water striking planks. That habit does not leave quickly. A navigator spends too many nights learning the speech of a hull for silence to erase it in one evening. The ship has taught your body to measure darkness by movement. At sea, there are no bells dividing the hours for you. No clock, no mechanical certainty ticking in the corner. Time is judged by the sky when it can be seen, by the slow turning of stars, by the pallor before dawn, by hunger, by weariness, by whose turn it is to watch the sail and feel the pull, of course through the steering oar and the swell. Even ashore, that old counting continues for a while. You lower yourself onto bedding that feels too still. It may be straw under a cloth, or piled wool or hides, depending on the household and the season. In any case, it is softer than a ship's timbers, broader than a narrow place made between chests, gear, and sleeping men. On many voyages, rest is taken where it can be taken. Awnings may shelter part of a crew in kind weather, and sailcloth can soften wind a little, but much sleep aboard comes cramped, damp, and interrupted. Wood under shoulder, rope against calf, salt drying on the edge of a sleeve. One ear open for orders, one hand close to what must be adjusted if weather changes. Here, by comparison, comfort is almost suspicious. No rope knocks lightly against a mast. No line needs checking. No pooled bilge water chills the edge of your foot. No square wool sail, heavy with wet and value and labour, waits above you for the next hard gust. The sail is never only cloth. It is months of work standing in the wind, wool grown, cleaned, spun, woven, prepared, handled, repaired. At sea, it asks for ceaseless attention. Slack here, strain there, salt in the fibres, stretch after rain. A frayed place noticed before it becomes a torn one. Even while lying down on shore, you know that somewhere not far away, the vessel still exists as a list of future tasks. Tomorrow or the day after, men will look over lines with practiced fingers. They will check what has chafed and what has held. They will notice if caulking has opened anywhere along the clinker planks, those overlapping boards that give the hull its flexible strength and its familiar creaking life. They will empty what should be emptied, dry what can be dried, rearrange cargo or gear. A side-mounted steering oar fixed out on the starboard side near the stern must be trusted each time a vessel goes out. Trust is built from inspection as much as from courage. Seafaring sounds grand only to people sleeping far from spray. In truth, it is made of maintenance. You lie still and feel how the voyage lingers in your muscles. The shoulders keep a memory of bracing. The hands keep a memory of wet rope. The eyes keep a memory of searching dark edges where sea and sky meet. For an experienced sailor, especially one entrusted with direction, that searching has layers. On a clear night, north can be held roughly by the star we call Polaris, though in your age it does not sit perfectly at the celestial centre. It is near enough to help, not exact enough to worship. A useful point, a companion, not a ruler. Around it, the rest of the sky turns, and from that turning come small corrections made almost without speech. But the stars are never the whole story. They cannot be. Clouds pass, fog closes, rain erases half the world. Then memory takes more of the load. So does the swell. So does the wind on one cheek. So does the sound of water striking from a slightly altered angle. So does the count in the body of how long the vessel has run under this weather and this sail. Modern people call that dead reckoning. You would not need the phrase. You need only the practice. You carry root knowledge as a set of relationships. This wind with that coast, this season with that crossing, this bird when land is nearer, this colour in the water, this smell of weed, this long daylight of northern summer that gives a crew more chances to correct, to observe, to endure. And now, in the dark house, all of that knowledge begins to sink out of active thought and back into the quiet storage place where skilled habits rest. You do not recite routes before sleep. You do not name every star. You let them blur. You let the mind unclench from usefulness. There is no honor in staying alert when a roof is over you and others have already begun to dream. Somewhere nearby, another sleeper turns and settles. A child may sigh. A coal may crack softly in the hearth. The smell of smoke, wool, damp earth on shoes and old timber lies close and ordinary around you. It is a crowded smell compared with the open sea. Less clean perhaps, but kinder. It asks nothing of your judgment. It does not demand that you hold a ship to a line no one can see. This too belongs to navigation in a quiet way. Not the steering of a vessel, but the return of the self. A man cannot remain forever stretched between horizon and guesswork. He must come back to walls, to known voices, to a meal that does not sway, to sleep that is allowed to deepen past caution. Your body resists that gift for a little while. It gives one last false sense of motion, one last inward shift, as if a swell were passing under the floor. Then slowly, even that begins to fade. The house remains still. The earth remains still. The sea for tonight can go on moving without you. And at last you rest not like a watcher, but like a man ashore, breathing in smoke and wool instead of salt, listening to rafters instead of rigging, letting darkness be only darkness, with no course hidden inside it. The stars continue above the roof, whether you study them or not. The long northern routes remain where they have always been, held in memory, in practice, in stories told aboard and afterward. But they can wait until morning. For now, there is only warmth thinning into night, the calm weight of tired limbs, and the deep plain mercy of sleeping on land. The house remains still for a little while longer. Smoke thins under the rafters. Someone turns in sleep. A log settles in the hearth with a soft, inward sigh. You lie in the dark and feel, little by little, that land is teaching your body its old lesson again. Not the rise and drop of water, not the long argument between hull and wave, just the simple weight of floor beneath bedding, just wool against skin, just the quiet fact that walls do not drift, and yet the sea does not leave at once. It lingers in you, in the small tightening of your hands, as if a line must still be checked, in the habit of listening past the house for a gust against sail that never comes, in the strange softness of silence, when no steering oar murmurs and no plank answers, the swell. Men who travel often by ship do not step fully onto land in a single evening. Some part of them remains set to weather, some part keeps count in darkness. So you rest. Not deeply at first. Rest comes in layers. You hear the breathing of other sleepers. You hear a faint animal sound beyond the wall, perhaps a cow shifting in its stall, perhaps only the dull complaint of timber cooling after the day. You smell old wool, banked ash, damp leather, a little fish oil caught in cloth that has travelled too many times between shore and ship to ever lose it fully. These are not grand things, but a life is mostly made of what clings. Salt in a seam, smoke in a blanket, tar under a nail. The sea travels home with you in pieces too small to name one by one. Tomorrow, or some other morning soon, there may be another crossing. Perhaps east again, perhaps north. Perhaps only a shorter run along a known coast where mountains rise when they should and headlands arrive in their proper order. Perhaps a harder route into wider water where memory does more work than sight. The work never becomes magical. It stays plain. You watch light. You judge wind. You remember how long a stretch of open sea feels in the muscles. You notice birds. You notice weed in the water. You notice the colour near the horizon. You notice what the sail is saying through the rope. You notice what the hull is saying through your knees and spine. That is the closest thing to a navigator's secret, not a hidden charm, not a single perfect device. There may have been aids now lost to us, and scholars still argue over bits of wood, over stories written down later, over whether a crystal, a shadow board, or some other clever help had a place in real practice. Some of that may be true, some of it may be only possibility. But even if a useful object rested in your hand, it could not spare you the older labor. You still have to learn the sky in many moods. You still have to know a route as something more than a line. You still have to feel when the ship is moving cleanly, and when it has begun, gently, to wander. And wandering is usually gentle at first. A little drift, a little trust placed in the wrong wind, a cloud bank taken too lightly, a star watched too long after it has slid from its best place. No single mistake needs to be large. At sea, small things join hands, so the opposite is also true. Safety comes from many small corrections, many dull decisions made in time. A line tightened, a bearing reconsidered, a watchful glance toward the northern sky. A quiet agreement between experienced men who do not need to speak much because each has learned the same water in his own tired body. That, more than any tale told later, is what carries a ship. Not heroics, habit, not glory, repetition, not certainty, attention. You have spent the day in those humble skills, watching stars when they show themselves, letting the swell tell part of the story when the sky withholds the rest, taking your place among others who know that every voyage is shared labor. The wool sail matters, the steering oar matters, the clinker-built planks matter, food and water matter, the memory of old roots matters, but all of them come together only through people, through hands, through eyes grown patient, through the long, ordinary training of doing the same necessary things again and again until they settle into the body. It is easy from far away to make such a life sound larger than it is, to fill it with omens and marvels, to pretend every crossing is a leap into the unknown. But most days are quieter than that. Most days, even on the northern sea, are made of maintenance, judging, waiting, adjusting, enduring dampness, sharing cramped space, and hoping the weather remains merely difficult instead of worse. Most skill is not dazzling, it is dependable, and now even that skill is sleeping. The route to Iceland or Greenland or back toward Norway remains where it always was, held in minds, in remembered sayings, in the teaching of older sailors to younger ones, in the habits of crews who have crossed and crossed again. No written manual survives to lay every step neatly before us. So any full day told this closely has to be, in part, a careful reconstruction. The broad frame is real. The ships are real. The sail, the stars, the swell, the side-mounted steering oar, the labour of dead reckoning, the use of birds and coastal signs, the discomfort of shipboard rest, the value of practiced memory. All of these belong to the world you have just moved through, but the exact order of thoughts in one tired navigator's head, in one night watch, under one bank of cloud, can only be approached gently. Perhaps that gentleness is fitting. The sea rarely gives a full account of itself. History does not either. So the night closes not with an answer polished smooth, but with a man ashore, breathing slowly at last, while above the roof the same stars continue their patient turning. Polaris holds near north, useful but not perfect. The dark between the stars remains dark. The routes across the water remain possible because people have learned, through long repetition, how to live inside uncertainty without needing to conquer it. And under the blanket, that is enough. The fire sinks lower. The room grows cooler at the edges. Sleep moves in without asking your leave. Outside, beyond field and shore, beyond harbour and headland, The northern sea keeps its own long motion. But for this hour, it does not need your eyes. Morning will come when it comes. Another tide will lift some other hull, or perhaps your own again. Another wool sail will draw. Another watch will begin. Another young hand will learn to notice what older hands no longer explain in full. And somewhere under a cloud break or a pale noon sun, another quiet correction will keep a ship on its way. But not now. Now the deck is gone. The oar is still. The rope is slack in memory only. And you sleep on land while the great cold water moves on in darkness, patient as ever, waiting beyond the roof for those who know how to listen to it. Even on land, the sea does not leave you at once. You wake before the others in a room that is still and dry, and for a few breaths your body waits for the next lift of the hull. It does not come. The floor stays level under your weight. The wall does not murmur with water. Only a faint draught moves through the roof thatch, carrying the smell of old smoke, wool, and yesterday's broth. Your hands rest open beside you, no longer curled around rope in sleep. And yet, the voyage remains in you. Not as a tale, not as a proud thing, more as a set of habits that have settled into the muscles. You still listen for wind before you fully wake. You still notice where the light lies, even before dawn has become proper morning. You still measure quiet by what is missing. No creak of straining planks, no slap of wave under bow, no soft complaint from wet sailcloth, drying too slowly in cold air. The people around you sleep as people on land sleep, heavier, deeper, without one part of the mind kept awake for change in weather. A child turns under a blanket, someone coughs once and settles. Ash in the hearth gives off the last little heat of night. The room asks nothing from you. That may be the strangest feeling of all. At sea, even when you rest, your work does not stop. The ship continues beneath you. The course continues. Clouds gather whether you watch them or not. A navigator's labor is not only in pointing or naming or correcting. Much of it is in carrying a route inside the body so long that it begins to move there on its own. You learn the shape of a crossing through repeated passages. West from one shore, north of this danger, south of that ice. Wait for this bird, expect that swell. Watch the noon light, mark the slow turn of stars when the clouds allow them. No handbook survives to tell us every step in a Viking navigator's practice. That much is true. The exact order of thought, the private tricks of one experienced hand, the words spoken quietly at the stern in fog or in moonlight, these are mostly gone. But the crossings themselves are real. Iceland was settled, Greenland too. Ships moved again and again over open water that did not forgive guessing for very long. So knowledge had to live somewhere, in memory, in routine, in the training of younger crew by older ones, in ordinary corrections made so often that later you can still feel them after the deck is gone. You sit up slowly. The roof beams hold steady. The dim square of the doorway is pale now. Morning has begun somewhere beyond it, though inside the room the shadows still belong to night. Your shoulders ache in the small old places left by rowing, steering, bracing, and sleeping badly against timber. Salt has gone from your skin, but not fully from your things. Your cloak keeps a dry marine smell, wool and weather together. A person who has not voyaged might think navigation ends at landfall, as if once the keel touches shallower truth, the task is done and can be put away like an oar. But the work lingers. Your eye keeps making little measurements. The sun's rise matters, though no sail depends on it this morning. The wind at the door matters, though no yard must be trimmed. A line of birds overhead matters, though you need not ask whether they are commuting to shore, or wandering over fish, or marking some nearness of land. you notice them anyway. That is perhaps the plainest way to say it. You notice. You notice how damp air thickens sound. You notice when smoke leans rather than climbs. You notice whether cloud is high and thin or low and woolly, the sort that can erase distance at sea until horizon and sky become one pale uncertainty. You notice because you have had use for such things. And after enough seasons of use, attention does not switch off neatly. It remains, quiet, patient, waiting for need. In this way, the navigator is not a man with one secret tool. Not most of the time. The famous objects people like to imagine do not carry the whole burden. A broken wooden disc, if it truly served in finding the sun, might have helped. A crystal, if one was ever used aboard in the way later stories suggest, might have offered some comfort under cloud. But neither would replace the deeper instrument, the practiced body, the remembered route, the feel for drift, the habit of comparing many small signs instead of trusting one perfect answer. You learn to live without perfect answers. That may be the sea's first lesson and last one. Polaris can show north at night, but not with mathematical stillness. In your age, it does not sit exactly at the pole, only near it, useful and bright, a guide but not a nail hammered into heaven. The swell can keep a memory of distant wind, but cross seas can confuse it. Birds can suggest shore unless they are only feeding. The color of water can change for many reasons. Even the sun, so generous in clear weather, can vanish for days behind northern cloud. So you do not ask one sign to do everything. You let each sign carry only its own weight. This star for rough north, this wind for present pressure, this swell for older weather running below the newer one. This count of days for distance guessed and guessed again. This scrap of remembered route lore from men who have sailed west more often than they have walked inland. This smell, suddenly green in the cold air, perhaps from weed, perhaps from wet earth somewhere beyond sight. Piece by piece, not certainty, only enough. And often enough is all a voyage ever gives. Outside, someone begins to stir the fire. A pot lid shifts. A hen complains in the yard. Morning ashore arrives by chores that stay near hand. There is comfort in that. Small sounds in fixed places. Nothing sliding away beneath them. You stand and pull your cloak around your shoulders. For now, there is no stern to keep, no course to hold. Only light growing at the door. Only ground underfoot. Only a day on land that asks less from the eyes, though the eyes will go on measuring for a while yet. They cannot help it. They have been taught by too much water. And so you step into the pale morning carrying the sea in the quietest way possible. Not in boasting, not in story, in attention, in the plain habit of feeling where the world is leaning, even when, at last, it is not leaning at all. You go on across the morning shore with the odd, careful balance that comes from many days afloat. The ground is firm, but your body still waits for movement. It expects the long, slow lift under the feet. It expects a sideward shove from water-meeting timber. Instead, there is only packed earth, a little damp from the night, and a strip of pale light spreading across roofs, carts, and drying nets. The work of a navigator does not leave you when you sleep ashore. It stays in smaller habits. You look up before speaking as if to judge the sky. You notice the wind not as weather alone, but as direction. You feel it on one cheek, then the other, and without thinking, you mark its angle. A gust from the sea means one thing. A drift from inland means another. Even on land, the world keeps offering signs, and your mind keeps sorting them. This, perhaps more than any lost instrument, is what guides a ship. Not a single secret object tucked into a chest. Not one marvel passed from master to boy. The steadier truth is quieter. Repeated voyages teach the body to compare. Light against memory, swell against memory, the pull of a steering oar, the sound of water on the strakes, the height of a star above the horizon. None of these alone is enough for every hour. Together, they become a kind of practice that lives in the hands, the neck, the eyes, and the back. Historians can say with confidence that Norse sailors crossed open water again and again in the Viking Age, reaching Iceland, Greenland, and even North America. They can point to ships built for such travel, to route traditions written down later, to settlements that would not exist without successful passage. But no complete Viking sailing manual survives to tell you, in plain steps, exactly how each navigator arranged the signs in his mind. So some part of this quiet morning reflection is reconstruction. Still, it is a careful one. Repeated crossings do not happen by luck alone. They happen because knowledge becomes ordinary. You see that ordinariness in the harbour before you. A rope is checked because frayed rope parts at the wrong time. A wool sail is dried and inspected because salt and wet stretch it. The steering oar is looked over because a side-mounted blade near the stern must answer when called upon. A man who has spent enough seasons on northern water does not separate navigation from these chores. Course begins long before open sea. It begins in maintenance, in memory, in the plain refusal to ignore small faults. The grander stories told later can make the northern sailor sound as if he walks into mist with heroic certainty. But certainty is not the right feeling. Nearer the truth is trained doubt. You keep noticing, you keep checking. On a clear night, the North Star is useful. Yes, though in your age it does not sit exactly on the pole. It points near north, not perfect north. So even the star most trusted is treated like a companion, not a king. Under cloud, you would rely more on other things. On the set of the sea, if it holds steady enough. On the remembered run of the ship through the hours. On birds, if birds are about. On the colour of water. On smell, now and then. On the plain count of time, felt in hunger, weariness, watches and repeated tasks. Because there is no shipboard clock to rescue anyone from inattention. That kind of knowing is difficult to display in a hall. It leaves little behind. A carved fragment of wood may survive. A later story about a sunstone may survive. A disputed shadowboard may survive in pieces. Scholars may test crystals and charts and noon shadows, wondering whether some useful device once sat in a mariner's kit. Perhaps in some cases it did. Perhaps a simple board helped compare the sun at midday on a familiar route. Perhaps a crystal, under certain skies, could hint at the hidden sun. Those possibilities are not foolish, but they remain debated. The stronger ground is simpler. You know ships crossed because they arrived. You know crews learned because the routes were used again. So this morning on land feels, in its own dull way, like part of the voyage. You pass a hull under repair and glance automatically at the overlap of planks, the clinker skin that gives the vessel strength, and a little flex in rough water. You notice tar. You notice wool fibers snagged near a beam. You notice the way an older sailor runs his thumb along a line without looking, checking twist and wear by touch alone. None of it is dramatic. All of it matters. The sea trains people into this plain attention. It teaches that mistakes are usually small before they become large. A sail trimmed poorly is first just a shape. Then it is lost motion. Then it is strain. A heading allowed to drift is first only a feeling that something is not quite square. Much later, perhaps too late, it is distance. So the useful navigator is rarely the loudest man aboard. More often he is the one who grows quiet at the right moment. The one who notices that the sail no longer sounds the same. the one who lifts his face from a conversation because a breeze has shifted a little, the one who feels the vessel dragging differently across the swell and says so before the others have words for it. And on land, with no sail above you and no bilge water under your feet, that same habit remains. You stand still near the edge of the harbour and watch morning collect itself. A few birds cut low over the water. Smoke rises almost straight from one roof, then bends. Somewhere wood knocks against wood with the soft patience of moored craft meeting each other. The tide changes nothing quickly. The light changes everything slowly. You breathe the smell of salt, damp timber, fish, tar and cold air, and the whole art of finding one's way begins to seem less like a secret and more like a long discipline of noticing. A man learns the stars, yes. He learns routes, winds, seasons, coastlines, and distances carried in story. He may learn some aid for sun or shadow, but above all, he learns to let the world keep speaking in small signals until hearing them becomes almost the same thing as living. By the time the sun rises a little higher, the harbour is less silver and more plain. Work will follow, food, repair, waiting. Another departure someday, soon enough. But for this moment, there is only the quiet fact that the sea has shaped your senses and has not yet released them. Even here on solid ground, you are still measuring, still comparing, still holding inside the body a course that no one else can fully see. By evening, the skill has still not left your body. You are under a roof now, or at least near one. Timber stands still around you. The ground does not rise, it does not sink, and yet some small part of you keeps waiting for the next lift under the feet, the next long answer from the swell. The body expects motion because motion has been its teacher for so long. This may be one of the quiet truths of a navigator's life. The work is not only done out on open water, it goes on afterward in the way the senses refuse to turn off at once. Your eyes still measure the angle of a line without meaning to. Your ears sort distant sounds as if one of them might be wave against plank. Your skin notices every draft of air and asks, from habit alone, whether it carries weather. So the evening on land is not a grand homecoming. It is plainer than that. You step around coils of rope hung to dry. You pass wool stiff with salt. You notice tar, fish, damp boards, and smoke from a nearby hearth. Men speak in low voices about repairs, cargo, another crossing when the time is right. No one needs poetry for this. The ship will need work. The sail will need looking over. Water casks must be checked. Small losses must be counted before larger plans can be made. If you have come in from a longer voyage, there may be news waiting on shore. If you have only returned from a coastal run, there may be almost none at all. In either case, the rhythm is familiar. A vessel that survives by constant correction asks for constant care once beached or tied fast. The steering oar is inspected. Fastenings are watched. Wet things are dried if weather allows. Frayed rope is handled, turned, judged by touch. A good line tells the truth in the hand. A bad one tells it too late. You do not carry a written sea manual tucked into a chest. Very little of this life is held that way. What lasts is carried in memory, in phrases, in examples, in routes spoken aloud often enough that they settle into the mind. Sail west, from one coast under the right season. Keep the light as you know it should stand. Notice how long the bird traffic lasts. Notice where weed begins to show. Notice the watercolour when shelves and shallows approach. These are not secret sayings. They are practical ones. Repeated enough, they become part of the body's plain furniture. That is why teaching, when it happens, often looks so ordinary. A younger hand walks beside you or works beside you. He hears place names not as wonders, but as intervals. He hears which wind is favorable, which one merely tolerable, which one sends spray in a way that tires the crew too early. He learns that stars are useful when they appear, but they are not magic. The North Star can help hold north at night. Yes, though in your age it does not sit exactly at the true pole. It is close enough to matter, not perfect enough to trust alone. So even on clear nights, one sign joins another, and when the sky closes, as northern skies often do, the lesson becomes quieter still. Then the old habits matter more. You hold a heading by wind on the face, by the sail's pull, by the remembered run of the hull, by the time that seems to have passed though no clock marks it, only fatigue and hunger and the changing quality of light. Modern people might want a single neat answer here, a single device, a single hidden trick, but your world is less tidy and more human than that. Knowledge comes layered. One cue helps another. A star supports a swell. A bird confirms a guess. A smell of weed or land steadies hope, though hope is not proof. There are stories written down later that hint at tools for finding the sun when cloud covers it. There is also that much-discussed wooden fragment from Greenland, the one some have read as part of a shadow measuring aid. Perhaps such things helped. Perhaps in some places they did. But the truth must stay gentle and honest. The evidence is not complete. No full Viking Age handbook survives to explain each step. So if an object like that belonged to your world, it would still have lived among older, broader skills, not replaced them. Wood and crystal, if used at all, would have served a trained mind, not stood in for one. This is why the work can seem almost invisible from shore. Outsiders may see only arrival and departure. They may admire the ship itself, the carved prow, the sail pulling broad in good weather. They may speak as if the voyage belongs to boldness alone. But boldness is not enough for repeated crossings to Iceland, to Greenland and beyond. Repetition asks for something duller and more dependable. It asks for people who can remember, people who can compare one day's signs against another, people who can live with uncertainty for a very long time without pretending uncertainty is gone. So now, in the slowing light, you sit with that plain kind of knowledge. Perhaps you mend something small. Perhaps you eat dried food softened a little, or whatever shore meal is at hand. Shipboard meals themselves are hard to recover in exact detail, so this part must remain somewhat reconstructed from broader Norse diet. But it is safe enough to say the food is simple. It is meant to keep strength in the limbs, not wonder in the heart. Around you, others settle into their own tasks. A crew is never made of one skill only. Yet each man knows that some knowledge sits more heavily with the experienced steersman and the one who keeps the course in mind. Not because he commands the sea. No one does that. Only because he has spent enough years listening that the sea has begun to leave marks inside him. And those marks remain even now, while everything is still. The harbour darkens. The roof beams hold their shadows. The smell of tar softens into the smell of evening smoke. Somewhere outside, water taps wood in a gentler pattern than the open sea. Your breathing eases with it. The measuring does not stop entirely. It simply grows quieter. Tomorrow, there may be repair work, or loading, or waiting on weather, or another departure when sail, crew, and season agree. But not yet. For now, the day narrows into a small, calm space between voyages. You do not need to prove what you know. You only keep it. In the hands, in the eyes, in the patient habit of noticing. And as night settles more fully over the harbour, that may be the simplest way to understand a Viking navigator at all. not as the keeper of one lost marvel, not as a hero standing alone under famous stars, but as a person trained, slowly and repeatedly, until swell, wind, light, birds, distance, and memory begin to speak one language inside the body. Even on land, you are still listening, and little by little, in the shelter of wood and dim firelight, the listening becomes rest. Inside the dim shelter, the listening becomes rest, not all at once. The sea does not leave you in one clean motion. It loosens slowly, first from the knees, then from the shoulders, then, little by little, from the eyes which no longer have to search every line of darkness for a change in water. The fire is low now, not a bright fire, only a small bed of red under ash, with enough warmth to dry the nearest edge of a cloak and to soften the chill that rises from the floorboards. Tar, wool, smoke, and salt remain together in the room. They are still in your hair, still in the seams of your clothes. The voyage has ended, but the harbour has followed you indoors. You sit where the wall keeps out most of the wind. The boards creak now and then, though they are not moving with waves. Habit makes you notice anyway. A shift in timber, a settling sound, the scratch of cloth as someone turns in sleep nearby. The faint clink of a wooden bowl being set down for morning. In a life arranged around departures, these small indoor sounds begin to stand in for surf. Your hands are quiet. That may be the strangest part. They are not on an oar, not on a wet line, not resting near the steering oar while you judge a sail's pull through the dark. They are empty now, and because they are empty, they begin to remember. The grain of the steering loom, the pull of rope gone heavy with spray, the little corrections that never look dramatic from the outside, a wrist turning, fingers tightening, shoulders taking strain so gradually that no one watching from shore would think much of it. That is true of most of the work. Navigation in this world is rarely a grand pointing at the horizon. It is not a single command and not a single tool. It is a long obedience to small signs, a certain height of the North Star over black water, useful but not perfect. A known swell arriving against the hull in a pattern the body trusts. Wind on one cheek, then less wind, then more. A memory of how long the light has been fading. A count kept without numbers written down. Time felt through hunger, stiffness, wakefulness, and the slow turning of the sky. If the night is clear, a star can help. If the night is clouded, the ship still speaks. The sail tells on itself. The planks answer the sea. Water changes colour before land is near enough to touch. Birds pass overhead with a purpose that empty ocean birds do not always have. Sometimes there is weed, sometimes a smell that does not belong to open water. Sometimes only a quiet sense built from many earlier crossings that the route is holding or slipping. Much of that knowledge is hard to set into words even now, resting by a weak fire on steady land. There are no surviving manuals from your own age that lay the whole practice out in steps. Later texts preserve route knowledge. Sagas and itineraries remember places and bearings and sailing relations between one land and another. But the full craft likely lives most securely where so much labour lives. In repetition, in watching older hands, in being corrected without ceremony, in making the voyage often enough that the body's guess becomes less of a guess, so you do not think of yourself as keeper of a secret device. The sea would not reward that kind of pride for long. People later may become fascinated with objects. A wooden disc with a peg hole, a crystal held to cloudy light. Such things may have had some use, or they may not have been used in the tidy way later minds prefer. A shadow board for noon sun has been proposed, A sunstone has been argued over. Both remain uncertain. What is certain is more ordinary. Ships crossed, routes were kept, Iceland was reached, Greenland was reached. And once the western shore beyond Greenland was reached as well. Those voyages did not happen by wonder alone. They happened because crews learned what a vessel feels like when it is true to its course, because a side-mounted steering oar can be held with patience, because a wool sail, though costly and temperamental, can carry a ship far when watched and trimmed and mended, because clinker-built planks flex with the water instead of fighting it too stiffly, because men aboard share labour. One bails, one checks a line, one watches the sky, one remembers where the last good bearing was taken, one sleeps while he can, damp and cramped beneath cloth or open air, so that he may wake useful again. And then there is you. Not a legend in the act of being made, only an experienced person among experienced people, tired often, cold often, salt stiff, responsible in a way that leaves little room for boasting. If you guide a ship well, most of what anyone sees is that nothing goes wrong. The sail keeps drawing, the hull keeps answering. Land appears when it ought to appear, or near enough. It is careful work with plain rewards. The room grows quieter. Someone exhales through a blocked nose. Someone else shifts deeper under wool. Outside, the harbour makes its own soft sounds against pilings and hulls. The water is still moving, though you do not have to move with it tonight. That may be enough. Tomorrow, there may be repairs. Tar warmed and pressed into seams. Rope checked for wear. Sail examined where salt and strain have begun to work at the weave. Trade to discuss. Weather to judge. News from another boat. Questions about when to go again and whether the season is still generous enough for it. Northern sailing always prefers more light when it can get it. Clear skies help. Longer days help. But no season is ever obedient. For now, no one asks you for a course. That absence has its own shape. It feels first like alertness with nowhere to go, then like a long, careful loosening. Your ears stop measuring every sound as information. Your eyes accept the room instead of searching beyond it. Your back settles against the wall. The body, trained to keep a line through darkness, allows itself at last to drift somewhere harmless. And perhaps that is the simplest end to the day. Not a final revelation, not a lost instrument explained, only this quiet truth. A Viking navigator is less a master of one magical method than a person altered by repeated travel. The stars matter when they show themselves. The sun matters when it can be read. Swell matters. Birds matter. Memory matters. The ship matters. The crew matters. None of it works alone for long, so night closes in around the harbour and the fire sinks lower. Outside, above roofs and mastheads, the northern sky continues its old turning. Somewhere beyond sight lie the routes already learned and the routes still waiting. But not tonight. Tonight, the course is only a few steps long. Wall, fire, wool, breath, sleep. And by dawn, when the first grey light finds the harbour again, what you know will still be there.